Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Law-Splaining the Interwebs. I am your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. And with me today is Kurt from Uncivil Law. By the way, his link is in the description. Make sure you go check it out. He had a great video today on just how ridiculous the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is when they have guns at issue. So I won't spoil it too much, but it has my favorite phrase in it due to my training and experience. That's a preview for any of you in the legal know. Go check it out, though. Subscribe to his channel. Really fantastic analysis, and he finds way more fun lawsuits than I'm able to. So do that. But no, there's no Tim tonight. There's no Ty. It is only Kurt and I and you, the chat. So here we are. So how's it going, man? Yes, and I love being in limbo. I love that we're not muted. Are you muted? God damn it. Arrgh! Sorry. Here's the problem. I'm gonna tell you guys the problem. It is my fault. Let me get Kurt on the... Where is the This is actually Snaj's fault. Okay, Kurt hit me with a couple... I thought I sound checked this before, but still muted. I am looking for you very much. How about now? There you are.
Fantastic.
Okay, so everything he said didn't matter. Look, I'm as professional as a vote counter in Wayne County. I'm
Nice.
just kidding.
Very good.
I'm just kidding. We've got to open up with some jokes and with some levity. Okay, can you say over everything you've said so far, word for word?
I'll do my best. I was just saying that I've been watching the news like everyone else, watching the vote count come in, watching the reports of the voter lawsuits that have been filed, trying to keep apprised of anything that looks promising, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to figure out which side of this thing it's going to land on. It's a mess. It's a total mess, and it's amazing how tight this is. It reminds me a lot of 2016, although kind of the other way around. When Donald Trump won the election, he won due to about 70,000 votes split between Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And this is kind of looking like the opposite of that. So if it winds up that Donald Trump is going to lose, it's going to be because of 70,000 votes, give or take, between Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Georgia,
right,
Nevada. I mean, this like, it's about that tier of closeness, give or take. It's just spread out a lot more states. So it's interesting trying to keep apprised of all this stuff.
Yeah, it's really tough to follow. It's tough to, of course, when you've got a heated and contested election like this, and a big one. This isn't, someone brought up that there was like a redo of an election in North Carolina or New Jersey or something. And it was like a city council election. It's like, okay, well, sure, a couple thousand people are mad. Right now, we've got potentially 70 million people on the hook for being very angry about whatever is going on at any given moment. That's a big difference between a small election. This is the biggest type of election. This is the highest voter turnout we've ever had by a long shot, and tensions are high. And of course, the states that we want answers for are taking forever, which is amazing how that tends to work out. It's never like
Nevada's got to be my favorite in the whole thing. It's like, yeah, we're gonna not really turn in any results until tomorrow, and then they said, oh well, because there's a lot of interest in it, maybe we'll count a little longer. It's like you couldn't have anticipated interest in this beforehand. Didn't see that one coming.
Well, I think to my credit and to theirs, I'm pretty sure on election day I made a joke about how silly it would be if it all came down to Nevada, and now it might. Now it might actually do that. But
Insert your own lazy what happens in Vegas here joke.
right.
Although that being said, I have to give props to whoever it was who works for the government board of elections, gave this press conference this afternoon from Clark County, and
Okay.
it was just great because this guy was so pissed at the press because he gave this introduction basically saying out here's exactly the numbers, here's exactly where we are, here's exactly what we're doing, and then the press just started asking him questions like, were you not listening, were you not paying attention? And he's just like beating the press to death. It was hilarious. It was hilarious. This guy could not give two shits, and he's like, what is your problem, were you not listening to me? And he's some official board guy. I highly recommend it. It was one of the better press conferences I've ever seen. This guy's just destroying the press for asking
Nice.
stupid questions.
Oh, that sounds good. Maybe we'll watch that. So you said that was from Clark County today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll if we get a moment of lull, and you happen to be able to pull it up on YouTube, shoot me a link. Either, text or whatever is fine. And then maybe we'll pull that up. I do intend to watch with you guys because you may not have seen it. Donald Trump's speech that he gave today. Very different sort of character of Donald Trump. A little bit different tone. He's on election night. He was combative. He's still combative, but he's a little more toned down. And he's taking a more somber approach to things, it looks like. But he says some interesting stuff in there that I think we can talk about. So we'll be doing that in a little bit. It's about 17 minutes of video. So we've got that. I want to talk about Arizona because I think Arizona is still a big question mark as the numbers have kept coming in. He's actually closing the gap at a slightly faster pace than what was necessary to win. So it really does depend on how the rest of Arizona pans out. We've got to talk a little bit about Georgia and Pennsylvania because those are coming down to razor thin margins. I mean, absolutely.
Georgia's at 1,700 votes right now. I mean, it couldn't get much closer. And someone has to explain this to me a little bit because I'm having difficulty time understanding why Florida overperformed the way it did and Georgia is so tight. I guess what's going on in Atlanta is the only thing that you can ask right now, but it's strange.
I have two lives that I live in, right? I have my analytical legal side, and I'm trying to bring as much of that as possible to the election coverage. I'm not trying to do my my fun thinking side, but just for a moment, what is going on in Atlanta is a really good question. 6:30 this morning, there were 25,000 votes left to count in Georgia. By 11:45 this morning, there were 61,000 votes left to count in Georgia. And that's the type of stuff, the inaccuracy of numbers being thrown around that leads to a lot of confusion. And that's kind of why I want to talk about Georgia. Now, not all of the votes that are left to count are in Fulton County, where Atlanta is. There are votes in heavy Biden counties. There are votes in heavy Trump counties. And it really is too close to call either way at this point. And it is because the media would do a great blow to go ahead and call this race for Biden if they had any confidence that they won't be just eating those words in a week. I mean, they are being, to their credit, I think they're being extra cautious in not calling the last 6 votes. Calling not necessarily Nevada, but even just calling Georgia Biden's way. I think they plausibly, based on how they've called other states, could do it, even if it may edge Trump, but they're not. And some of the hint in that is, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that I agree with you that normally they're being very cautious, which makes the fact that the AP called Arizona so surprising because the AP says, well, we're not going to call someone unless we're 99.5% confident. Well, I was not looking 99.5% confident right now. I don't know what they were doing when the
Right.
AP was calling this, and Fox News was making the same mistake too. So I don't know what they're looking at.
Yep, and I think AP. Oh my God, the stream is buffering. This is YouTube life, man. YouTube life is kicking my butt right now. It looks like it's about to come back. We're back. We're back. It's okay. Hold on, let me tell them refresh. Refresh. All right, it's just
I
a
have
stream
Google
hiccup.
Fiber, so it's not me.
It's I have Charter. I don't have their fiber, but I have their gigabit service too. So it's like it's good. If I could get Google Fiber, I would. They just don't have it out in my area. But I have the next best thing I have the best possible internet connection. It's literally, guys, there is so much traffic on YouTube right now. And this is a brief aside from everything, but election night 2, CNN pulled the highest numbers of any media broadcast. Well, what's that tell you? Well, I don't know what it tells you. What it tells me is that one, a lot of people stopped watching Fox for election coverage, probably because of their Arizona call and their refusal to undo it. They have actually pulled back from Fox, I think, and I would wager that the conservative audience that was watching Fox is seeking their information from YouTube right now. They're pulling away from that, or maybe they're going to some of the other large networks. Maybe they see CNN as the least biased after Fox when your next choice is MSNBC. I don't know, but I think that's a big thing. But what I mean, though, in just a basic principle, is YouTube is getting more traffic from this election than they're used to getting, and that's saying something. So the stream hiccups we have to kind of deal with from time to time. It is interesting. They come when we talk about.
I don't know if we can talk about now or later, or maybe even a different day. But some of the stuff dealing with the media and the restrictions on media, what Twitter's doing to President Trump's Twitter page, where like every post is now being hidden behind a click wall.
Oh,
and some of the stuff that YouTube and Twitter and Facebook have been doing recently with taking down people and banning people, even people who are fairly centrist or even left wing, taking down these dissenting voices. It's been like that, of course, before. This is not new, but some of the stuff seems to be like new aggression, another step along the way, that a new step of aggression that we hadn't seen before. And I'm not sure if that means that they think that there's a Biden win out there to be had, and so they feel like there's no accountability, so there's nothing left to lose, or what's going on there. But it's really disturbing when so much of traffic is going through these providers who are now determining what is and is not worthy of being presented. And it, in some ways, it's kind of like going back in time, because if we go back 50 years ago, when there was only 3 stations on TV, and everyone was getting their news from Walter Cronkite, and there was only one reporter, then there was the gatekeepers of news, and then the internet was supposed to liberate all that. And now it's like they're trying to recreate the old gatekeeper scheme, and that's disturbing.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that for a second, because not only that, and that has been crazy. Trump, look, if Trump says we want to prevent fraud, he had a tweet that said basically that, nothing else, no links or whatever. Boom, behind a dangerous content warning. And so, you retweet it or whatever, and it'll get that same dangerous content warning. It doesn't get distributed the same way. You can't like it. They don't even let you do that, or it's crazy. So it's even pure opinion tweets from Trump are being, and again, we want to prevent fraud is not a dangerous statement in any way. I think that should be sort of the idea that everybody wants. In fact, Democrats have been saying, if we go back before the election, they've been saying that Trump was set up to steal the election this entire time. And so the idea that wanting to prevent fraud is weird or novel or somehow Republican inherently is nonsensical. And I don't remember those voices being censored. So there's that going on. But even in addition to how bad Trump Jr., Eric Trump are all getting hammered by Twitter, you've also got there are now some international civil liberties organizations calling for the removal of Trump during the election from Twitter. Did you happen to catch that story
I
today?
absolutely have. Yes, I've definitely seen some increased voices with the Trump has got to go.
Right.
You know, I am pretty convinced that in the event that Trump does not win the election, that's sometime on the afternoon of January the 20th, Trump's Twitter account will no longer exist.
Oh, yeah, I think he's gone really quickly. Although financially, I think that'll be a bad move for Twitter. They'll be absorbing some lost revenue from the amount of traffic and ads his tweet does generate. They do. I saw an economist break down just how much money Trump's Twitter account alone generates for them. But I think they will take the hit and let the virtue signal carry them through. I agree. But yes, there are rights organizations now basically saying that and think of how insane this is. When you think of like corrupt electioneering in third world countries and voter intimidation and stuff like that, do you think of the dictator, whoever it may be, tweeting about voter fraud as that sort of thing? Because to me, it seems a little different than like having federal officers of whatever regime it is show up and like extract votes from people. Or
Yeah, most dictators are not using Twitter for the simple reason that being dictators, all media is state-run media, and they control it all anyway.
right.
So they don't have to use Twitter because they don't want any voices there. Twitter, the idea that Trump is an authoritarian is like, again, he's like the worst authoritarian ever.
Right.
If he's trying to do something. I mean, you know, where is he sending in the troops to stop the vote? I mean, he may be filing lawsuits and stuff, but is he like trying to dispatch the army? Not that I saw. I may have missed a memo though. Not like I've been looking every 5 seconds.
So it's always this weird thing with the U.S. where you'll get like one of these multinational watchdog groups come out, and the standard that they apply for the U.S. is so ridiculous about like compared to like who they actually are normally going after, or who even they're not going after. It's like again, well, and it's mirrored in voter ID requirements, where for the U.S. to have a voter ID requirement is this crazy racist, right suppressing thing, but basically every Western nation in the world other than the U.S. has some level of voter ID, and even a lot of non-Westernized or non-industrialized nations have some sort of identification requirement because their vote is important. So the disparate treatment's just wild. But yeah, I think that Twitter has a high level of confidence that Biden is going to win. I really do. I think, and I'll again, this is my non like neutral analytical self coming through, of course, but I think Twitter has been pushing for a long time to make this happen. They started getting gears in place early on, and we saw little warning signs throughout this past year, really, this past 12 months, and then it's coming to fruition, and I think they taste it. I think they taste the victory of Biden, and the threat that Trump poses through executive action on 230 is going away. So we'll see.
So Jack Dorsey confirmed for FCC.
Yeah,
as an FCC commissioner.
Oh, if that happens, there's no hope.
We gotta find some people to appoint in some federal agency. What's Jack Dorsey doing? Let's make him FCC commissioner. That'll be good.
I do want to see him clear the Republican Senate, though. I do want to see him. I want to see that confirmation hearing. That would be a good one.
Yeah, so we got two. It looks like we got 2 runoff races for Senate in Georgia, and that will be on January the 5th. Depending, especially if Biden wins, that will be the most intense election anyone has ever seen for a while. You'd project both Republicans to win, but since no one has anything better to do, and it does mean control the Senate and the ability of Democrats to get through their plan, You would imagine that that's going to be the focal point of everything. So, yeah, January 5th, the people of Georgia are not done voting yet.
Okay, conspiracy hat. All right, this is
Mm-hmm.
specific conspiracy hat. Here, I'll put it on. This is also my just spitting facts hat.
Oh,
Okay, so
all right.
conspiracy hat goes on. You're not the only guy with a hat gimmick. I just invented one. They blow their shot by putting in all of the Biden-only ballots into Georgia early and not saving them for the runoff.
Or also maybe they blew their shot by spending $300 million on completely failed Senate races, so they don't have as much to spend now.
Right.
How's that $100 million against Mitch McConnell looking right now?
Well, it looks great to me, Kurt. Okay, so help me out though, because you might know more about this than me. Probably, almost guaranteed. What is the runoff process in Georgia for the Senate seat?
Yeah, so they have two Senate elections right now. One is because there was a term that was expired because it was a special appointment, and one's a normal election. And under Georgia law, you need a true majority, 50%. You need a true majority to win. Right. And it looks like in either case, are they going to get there? So at that point, they put the top two vote getters on and do a runoff. So it'll be a fixed ballot. Pick one of two names and go from there.
So they actually go back into the to vote on it.
There'll be another vote, another election. People have to show up again. Maybe we'll have to do some mailed-in ballots again. We'd have this whole argument again in exactly 2 months. Yeah,
that will be an absolute disaster. Whatever happens, there's no way that is not a complete shit show, because it looks like it will be control of the Senate, right? Like there are four seats left. It's 48-48.
Yeah.
And I think it's a 1-1 split on those two, on the other two seats, right? As predicted right now. So, whew, that'll be intense.
So Susan Collins is suddenly the most important senator in the Senate. You know. I mean, just by reality, she's the most important because she's the most likely to flip. So suddenly, everyone has to cater to Susan.
Right,
it'd be great for her.
It's the one time in your career when it pays off. It's like, yeah, I am the margin guy. Perfect. Everybody, bring me favors. Put me on committees. Oh man, that's good. Okay, what are you thinking on Pennsylvania here? Because Pennsylvania is one of those weird places where I thought we were about done counting Philadelphia votes, but there keeps being more Philadelphia votes. And apparently some Pittsburgh votes now are coming in too. So Pennsylvania is trending towards Biden when it was heavily Trump favored. Yeah. For a long time.
If you had to project right now, you'd project Biden to win, and of course, if Biden wins Pennsylvania, that's the end of the game
by a long shot.
Yeah, by a long shot. So if you had to project right now, you'd project it, but again, it could go either way. I have been enjoying. I was watching this various secretaries of state give press conferences. I was watching, Pennsylvania give their press conference and all the rest of them. It's just like they all hate their life a little bit right now.
What about though? So if Pennsylvania flips, I haven't done the math, and then Arizona and Nevada flip the other way towards Trump. No, that's not enough because that's only what, 17, and Pennsylvania would be 20. But would that get
Pennsylvania 20 or 23?
20. Pennsylvania's 20.
Okay. That's right.
So if that flips to Uncle Joe, but Arizona and Nevada flip back. I mean, this is all weird theory crafting. And Georgia,
I mean, right, based on what you see right now with Pennsylvania, he'd have 284. So even if he got Nevada, even if Trump got Nevada,
right,
Georgia, North Carolina, there's not enough votes. He'd have to get and Arizona is 11, so that's 273. So he'd still have 3 more than he needed.
Yep, that's right. So yeah, if Pennsylvania flips, it goes. Although Trump did get a court victory in Pennsylvania today. which
Yes, for people being able to watch the polls and watch the elections and do counting, which incidentally is something I've actually done personally, not on this scale, but I've
right,
served as a poll watcher before
sure,
at my local election, and been there as they scan people in and watch them as they vote and make sure that that's going on. So I have a little bit of experience with that personally, and obviously the Trump campaign and others want to be able to watch the results, and they weren't letting them anywhere near where they could see. They're keeping them 50 feet away, 100 feet away. And the
right.
judge looked at this and said, no, you let them be close, 6 feet away, maintain social distance, make them wear a mask, etc., and so forth. But they're allowed to do that. So that was a perfectly fair decision. And I personally, I really enjoyed my own experience of being a poll watcher, because it made me appreciate, at least from what I saw, the redundancies and checks, and the fact that everyone's watching everyone, and that level of paranoia is somewhat reassuring. So
Right. But there's something interesting about the legal process where, when you think about it, it's funny that in Pennsylvania, the Democrats had to make the legal argument to keep people away from watching watching the ballots. Like Trump brings that up in his press conference today, and it's like, I don't know why they're doing that. Why would you argue against watching the election? And it's a great point, but that's how the adversarial legal process goes. Of course, they could have folded on it. They didn't have to make the argument, but it is, this is all part of the stuff that feeds into the suspicion about what's going on. But if I'm not mistaken, there was another order in Pennsylvania today, because they have another issue going on as well. And I think this is Pennsylvania, although maybe it's Michigan. I might be mixing these up, but I'm pretty sure they got an order for there's ballot identification verification. So when a mailed-in ballot came in, it's supposed to be identifiable to a ballot that was requested. And if for some reason it's not identifiable immediately, people have a couple days to rectify that identification. And there is a segregation order now from the court saying that any ballots that have not been identified by Election Day, or have not had their verification done by Election Day, have to be segregated out. And this is in conjunction with the other segregation that occurred in Pennsylvania, which is ballots received after Election Day but postmarked up to Election Day. Those are being segregated out, and they're counted now, but they could be challenged later and removed. So that's kind of an interesting sort of thing. But now the verification of the identification is also an order that the Trump campaign won today. Did I get that right? Is that what you saw?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. So I find that one really interesting too, because that is part of this mail-in process that has been such a mess. Is that there's supposed to be checks on whose mailed in ballots you actually have in your hand. They're supposed to be, in most states, they're supposed to be requested specifically. I think in Minnesota, I got a bunch of invitations to request my absentee ballot, but I did not get an actual absentee ballot unsolicited in the mail. But I heard that in some states they actually did do that. But in Michigan, there is a verification process. They have to do that, and the campaign wants to be able to challenge those unverified ballots that weren't verified by, was it today, or is it like the 8th? Do you remember?
I believe, well, because again, different states are doing different things. Because I think from the Nevada one, they said that they had to be verified by end of business Friday. And so I think different states have different verification deadlines to fix these deficiencies for whatever reason, signature not matching, or voter ID need to be presented, or whatever. Yeah, there's those deficiencies. They have to notify them, give an opportunity to cure. And I remember the Trump campaign was saying that they were trying to find 8,000 people that they had information on, trying to get them down to get their information verified. So
and
I don't know how successful that's going, but there you go.
It can be really tough because you don't know if you have a signature mismatch to whatever they have on file. I mean, there could be a filing glitch. There could be you could have had like a Parkinson's episode that day. You know, who knows what happens that that causes a mix up of verification. So these people could be on vacation, they could be anywhere, but that's the way. That's part of the risk of the absentee voting process as well. But I find that to be really interesting. I'm how are you, like, just in general? This is just an opinion. But how do you feel about the whole idea behind mail-in voting and absentee voting as a concept and as execution?
Well, I certainly have no objection to people requesting ballots and receiving them. The idea of mass mailing out ballots gives me a lot of pause
Right.
because those ballots can be. I'm also very concerned and opposed to the idea of ballot harvesting. So I'm uncomfortable with private individuals trying to collect ballots
Right.
and gather them together and take them together, because you never know what those private individuals are going to do with them. You know, as far as I'm concerned, the voter should put it into the mailbox and, you know, go from there. That no one but the voter should deal with that. But the idea of having mail-in ballot is absentee ballot is fine. I mean, the military does it. A lot of people move or are not available to be able to vote in person. So I think mail-in balloting can be done properly when there's these procedures and checks. And some of the states have been trying to do that with making sure that they're tied to a requested ballot, trying to tie them to the voter. But yeah, I have real problems with these private collection. That was like what California was trying to do, put at these private boxes, and then you wind up with someone with 30,000 ballots in their trunk, you know,
Yeah.
some random guy. And it's like, this cannot be good. No matter what this guy is, this cannot be not be good.
Well,
Because
listen,
again, my experience from being a poll watcher is all about the levels of paranoia. Everyone's watching everyone all the time, so that everyone has a sense of what's going on and that nothing funny is going on. And so if, you know, someone's receiving a sealed envelope, you know, from the postal that only touched the voter's hand, not so much a problem. If it goes through private hands, my concern goes up dramatically.
I have to apologize to the stream in the chat. I did not know I was inviting on hateful that is uncivil law. Because that's the argument in Minnesota, right? The Project Veritas video on ballot harvesting, accusing Ilhan Omar's campaign of engaging in this, and the accusation came from video of campaign workers doing exactly that, harvesting hundreds of ballots, bring them in. The argument from Minnesota and the Secretary of State of Minnesota is that limiting the absentee process to only the voter, or in our case, the voter plus three, you know, you could bring it up to three other people's ballots, that was an undue burden on people's ability to vote. That one
Why?
person, listen, because there's only one person in the entire state who can help a disabled person get a ballot to the mailbox, so they have to help all of the disabled people get the ballot to the mailbox. And that's a mild joke, but that's basically the argument. They say that it hurts English as a second language speakers. It hurts people with disabilities because it limits their options on who can bring in their ballot by limiting it to only 3 per person, which doesn't make any logical sense at all.
I mean, in most major cities, mailboxes can be located, you know, not infrequently on just the street corner or any post office, or there's lots of places to drop off the mail. So, are they saying disabled people don't do mail? How do they get their mail? Do they not get mail?
They just, I think maybe they just
seriously, do disabled people not go to the mailbox in order to get like utility bills or like other things that come in the mail? Are they saying disabled people don't get mail? Do they have someone helping them every day? How's that work? I'm confused.
Not well. Their bills are always late, from what I hear.
Okay.
No, I have no idea, but that's the actual argument that's been forwarded, is that it specifically harms and again, English as a second language people as well, because apparently they can't operate the mail system either.
Don't they have the same problem with getting like bills in the mail and other letters and notices? Do they not do mail?
No, they've never heard of it.
Okay.
It's a weird thing where only the US has a postal system at all, and and so no one else can figure it out. I don't know. I find it just I find the argument baffling. You know, that Yeah, that people are so incapable of doing these basic things. Like, I get that there may be someone who's movement limited that would have trouble getting into a mail location. I just don't get why one person in the state would theoretically be able to collect all of the ballots from every movement limited person by themselves and turn them all in at once with no oversight to it.
I mean, if they live in an apartment complex, usually usually there's a little mailboxes with a key, and there's a slot for outgoing mail. So you just put it into the outgoing slot mail. If they live in a home, you put it in the mailbox and you put up the little flag, so people know there's mail. Or if you're out and about, you can put it into one of those many, many blue boxes, or go to a post office, or probably just hand it off. I mean, did they not do mail? Do we need to have another campaign? Do we need Mr. Zip? We need Mr. Zip to come back. Explain mail. Yeah.
It's a weird thing. I don't know, but that's the mystery and wonder around the US election system, is that every time we bring up a simple concept, it gets needlessly complicated to the point of lunacy. Like a voter ID. And it's like, well, what if there's one guy who lives 285 miles away from the nearest city hall, and he doesn't drive ever, so he doesn't have a driver's license? How's he supposed to vote? It's like, I don't know, man. Send a government worker out to that guy in the middle of Montana. Like, just, I'll fund the trip myself if we can get voter ID for everybody else. Like,
in this hypothetical, how are we determining this guy who's 285 miles away is an authorized voter in the place he's trying to vote?
I don't know, but it's always that way. It's like, well, they can't possibly get to a government center to get an ID. It's like, how can they not? How are they going to vote? It's in the same place. They have to go somewhere close by. Just stop on the way there and get your ID and then go vote.
No, they can't go to the polls. That's racist. They can't request the absentee ballot. That's racist. They can't mail in the ballot. That's disableist. They can't be 250 miles away. That's biased in some way. I don't know. But
it's always like that with election issues. There's always some lunatic story that they'll come up with, and they'll stand in front of a judge and they will honestly lay it out as if it applies to any more than just that person. And it's like, come on. Well, he has no arms.
No, if we want to go after the edge case disenfranchised voter, the one that I think is sort of interesting is anyone who happens to move like really close to election day.
Right.
Because if you move really close to election day, you can't vote where you left because you no longer live there, and you can't vote where you just moved to because you didn't, you're not registered soon enough. So like most states like have a 30-day cutoff or something like that. So if you happen to move between states within 30 days of an election, you can't vote where you left. You're not a voter there anymore. You can't vote where you moved to because you're not registered. How about we talk about those disenfranchised people? That might be fun. There's some votes for you.
Yeah. Those votes would all go to Joseph Biden.
I'm sure.
All right. Well, maybe let's read a couple initial chats in case there's any questions, and then I'd like to pull up the Trump video, and we can watch that, and then we can get some thoughts on it, and maybe the audience will have some thoughts too. Bad Vibe says individuals who lean Republican have sexual interaction 8 times more often as the other group. Be thankful you are libertarian, Nick. Okay, thanks. Bad Vibe says you are delinquent and in arrears. I was sorry. Morty J says, hey, Nick and Uncivil Law. Hope y'all are doing well this Thursday night. Wanted to know your thoughts on Illinois voting on to separate from Chicago and the impact that could bring. Interesting to see states say enough is enough. Okay, let's cover this kind of generally as the idea of secession within a state, or even I guess annexing part of the state off. Is that the right word? Annexing?
No, I don't know what the right word is though.
Yeah, I don't know. Because, like, if I want to leave, that's secession. I guess annexing would be if I want to take a chunk of what you have, I would annex that. Devolving part of the state off you? Right. Whatever happened to West Virginia, that's what we need to talk about. So, there is there is a bar on doing this, right? A constitutional bar on drawing a borderline within a state that's already established without, in effect, a constitutional amendment. Is that the?
You don't
the
need a
gist of it?
constitutional amendment. You just need approval of the state and Congress. Same thing if you want to merge states. So if you want to merge states or you want to change boundary lines, you just need the approval of the respective legislatures. So if you're trying to split a state, then that would only be the one legislature, and then you
Sure.
need the approval of Congress to do it. But yeah, you don't need an amendment for that.
I thought you needed. I didn't. Not an actual amendment. I thought it was. I thought you needed a supermajority of Congress, like an amendment. But
No, I don't believe so. I have to
Okay.
double check the Constitution, but I don't believe it has a special requirement in the Constitution for the vote.
Well, then there's promise. Get Chicago out of Illinois. You can have the free state of Chicago. It'll be. Wait, actually, I don't know if that's a good idea. Chicago gets a
two more Senate votes.
Yeah, 2 more Senate votes, a House vote. Actually, Chicago might be big enough to get two House votes. Chicago
I'm
has
sure.
a way higher
Probably
population.
more than that, to be honest, if I had to guess.
Actually, Chicago would be pushing somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 Congress people, I think.
It sounds about right.
Oh my God, that'd be a disaster. Don't do it. You're stuck with them, Illinois. It's like the bad boyfriend that no one else wants either. You have to live with Chicago. But no, there's lots of questions about how a state could separate off and blah, blah, blah. And very briefly, I think we talked about Texas. There's some theory that Texas would have some special ability to split into 4 different states. I think they've already done that. Under the Treaty of Guadalupe. I don't know that that would happen. I think they'd just be subject to the same requirements that anyone else is. Texans very much think they have some special privileges under their treaty. I don't think that they actually do.
Maybe we could make all the really big cities, all in the United States, part of one big state. It'll be like an archipelago spread across the rest of the United States. So like New York, Chicago, LA, et al. Can be part of one new state.
The free state of liberal.
Yeah, the free state of liberal. That's right. It'll be great. There'll be enclaves within the rest of other states. It'll be like they could put up some border walls. Not that they believe in borders, of course, but they can put up some checkpoints and everything. It'll be great.
Red pie, and that's where everybody already goes to buy their drugs, so they can legalize drugs and it'd be fine. Everything
We've got to move to
normal.
Oregon now because all the drugs are decriminalized, man. Psilocybin's legal for recreational use, and all the drugs are legal for personal possession. So Oregon's the place to be, man.
I think that's actually great. I do. I think there should be at least one state where it's like, you've ever had that thing where it's like, you know what? I really just want to try acid or heroin or whatever that one time. Well, then go to Oregon, book an overnight, go down and meet Slim on the side of the road outside the Motel 6. He's got what you need, and then you can go in. It's decriminalized. You can fly home in the morning, and then just take a month off from work before you have to take a UA. It's perfect. Red Pirate 115 says, if Biden wins, would you even bother ever voting again? Yes. I think we were kind of talking about this before the stream, but maybe we should drop a little somber pill or sober pill or whatever it is. I do think that there is election fraud. I think there's election fraud present in every election. I'm very clear on that. But I'm not so sure that this election has, maybe there is, but I'm not convinced yet that there's particularly more voter fraud in this election than there is in other elections. I think we should work to eliminate the fraud, but I haven't somehow lost faith in an election system that I didn't hold too much faith in to begin with, but I'm not particularly tanked out of it now. I don't know about you, but that's where I am.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I know from my prior studies and prior experiences and prior reading of cases, some things that can go wrong in elections and some things that have gone very wrong in some places from time to time. But these things that I've been hearing about are on the grandest possible scale, kind of normal, because you have to remember that we're running, I don't even know, 4,400 different elections because they're all being run on different county levels and different boards. And so it's you're going to hear things like this from time to time where, this thing happened or that thing happened, and it's not abnormal. So what makes it a little bit different this time, of course, is the mailed in ballots,
Yes.
particularly if they are counting any ones that are postmarked after election day, because at that point, I'm going to throw a conniption. But other than that, I haven't heard any major problems with it. Even though there are lots of very concerned, because it's a big country and lots of things happen. So this is a little bit kind of par normal so far as I can tell.
So let me clarify some things, because I am watching the chat. I knew exactly how this discussion would go.
I'm not watching the chat. I know how it's going. I know they hate me. That's fine.
No, I think they are still responding to me. It's okay. It's okay. To clarify, there very well could be massive amounts of fraud. I'm not denying that. I'm very suspicious of the vertical line votes that have popped up in Wisconsin, in Michigan. I'm very suspicious of the consistent ability to find new ballots in heavily Democratic cities. I have reasonable or rational or semi-rational explanations that are entirely supposition, right? I can say, well, this is maybe how those came about. I don't know. Now, I'm open to being shown. I'm 100% open to them saying, look, no, we actually found massive voter fraud outside of the norm right now. But you also have to understand where I'm coming from. I wasn't surprised that they found 110,000 votes. Like, even though I think it's shifty, because I've seen the same thing happen in other elections or very similar things. Now, what Uncivil Law said, and I very much agree with, the big variable we have in this election that makes it ripe for really scary stuff, and I'm waiting to see more evidence come out about what is happening there, is the mail-in aspect of it. How the mail-in aspect is done goes from being very secure, like what Kurt was saying earlier, where someone requests a ballot gets tacked to their name, there's an identification verification process. Great. That's an okay thing. We've been doing that for years. It's a whole different animal when we're mailing out wholesale just a whole bunch of ballots, and there's no tracking to those. And those could be the source of a serious amount of fraud. And that we're going to see challenged in court. So before you guys say, I haven't been paying attention. No, I've been watching quite a bit, actually. And I do want to eventually get around to the video that's been posted on Twitter of a poll worker filling out ballots, because there is actually a pretty reasonable and rational explanation for why a poll worker, or more specifically, two poll workers, are sitting across from each other, and one is reading to the other and the other is filling out ballots. That is basically a process whereby a ballot was fed into a machine. It did not actually read the ballot, so they fill out with a opposing party representative sitting there, and a monitored process. They fill out the ballot according to the other ballot, but they just make sure and fill in the circles completely with an approved writing device. So does that mean that no fraud is occurring? No. Does it mean that this is a part of the election process that happens literally all the time and in every single election? Yes. And so it's not a particularly different set of fraud. It's not a particularly different process that's in place. That's where I'm coming from, and where I assume Kurt is coming from, in saying that there's a lot of this stuff isn't out of the ordinary, though it may look out of the ordinary, because if you haven't worked at the polls, if you don't know people who have worked at the polls in the past, you may not be familiar with these processes and why they exist. And when you're given an out of context video that's 45 seconds long with no audio that's easily audible, you can take things the wrong way. And that is the problem with the information flood we've got going around the election right now. And I just realized I'm talking a lot. Did you have anything to add to that?
No, I wanted to emphasize a little bit more about my concerns about the mail-in ballots, because I think highlighting why I'm concerned might be helpful. Because when you're dealing with people actually voting in person, because I have some experience, as I mentioned, with that. Everything is monitored at every step, to the point of redundancy. at least how we did in Virginia, I assume this is true in most states. There's two election judges. The one from the senior party and the one from the junior party determined on the last state election. So you have two election judges there, one from each party. Then on top of that, the parties can appoint poll watchers, independent of the election judges, to watch, and they can sit there and observe as every voter comes in. And they give their name, they give the ballot, they watch them go to the polls, they watch who's coming in and so forth and so on, and make sure that process is being checked. And all that during that time, everyone's watching everything. Then at the end of the day, at least historically, they take the machines, or they'd wrap them up, and sometimes they'd have to physically move them, or they'd use some sort of device to send the data electronically secured or whatever. But every step of the way, it's being monitored and watched to see what's going on. The problem with the mailed in ballot is specifically that you're losing all those steps of redundancy along the way. You have someone potentially picking up the ballot who's not the voter,
right,
and potentially interfering with the ballot. Even if not, it's going through the postal system, and you don't necessarily know what's going to happen along the way. Not that it might not necessarily get there, or it might be corrupted in some way along the way, and you don't know what's coming out the other end. And so there's these avenues where there's not this redundancy that you're used to. And now you have these drop boxes, some places not necessarily monitored, some of them were set on fire, some of them are being waterlogged. You don't necessarily know what's going on there. So there's these issues that are real there. And then, as I mentioned, the big one for me is any votes that were cast after election day, because it's like, well, now that I see it's super close, I really should go vote. It's like, no, you had your chance and you lost that one. So that's where my concern arises from.
And that's a big allegation from Project Veritas out of Michigan. And again, here's the thing: it's not that there isn't fraud or potential for fraud. Nothing would make me happier on earth than for the Trump campaign to collect credible, admissible evidence of massive voter fraud and bring it to court and win. Nothing on earth I would laugh for years. For the next 4 years, specifically, I would laugh for 4 years about how funny that is, and it would be great. I want that to happen. I definitely do. As of right now, they haven't done it. Now, they've only had 3 days. So that's where I'm coming from. If it makes you lose respect for me because I want to see evidence that is admissible and not just like Twitter.
Oh my holy God! You might actually want to look at evidence and consider its weight and actually think through issues. My God, what is your problem? Why are you not just a partisan hack, Nick?
Yeah. If you want me to, if that makes you lose respect for me, that's okay. It's fine. I don't buy it, but that's okay. So, but that's where I am. Nothing would make me happier than to have that happen. But until we start to see that stuff come out, and if it's there, and if they can find it, it's going to come up. This, I think at this point, there's no doubt we're going to have.
If you want to be pissed at the election, I'd like to go back to my earlier point. I'd like to suggest that the real issue isn't fraud, because I don't think it's that problematic. I think the real issues are going back to social media and going back to Twitter and going back to them preventing stories from being posted, and the unbelievably blatant way that the media has covered stories from one side and not the other side, because this election is right on the edge. And one can only begin to surmise that maybe if the media had been a little bit more even in this treatment, maybe the election wouldn't be this close. Maybe it'd be going the other way. And so the idea that Twitter, because of their choices, interfered with the election. If you want to be pissed at someone, be pissed at Twitter, would be my suggestion.
Yeah, be pissed at Twitter. Be slightly less pissed, but still a lot at Facebook. Be pissed at Gab and Parler for not being as effective as Twitter and Facebook. That's not really their fault either. They've run into several hurdles along the way. But be pissed at every reporter. Be pissed at The Intercept for trying to censor Glenn Greenwald when he brought up the Hunter Biden stuff. Be pissed at all. Where'd the Hunter Biden story go? before election, 2 weeks before election day, it was completely silenced by Twitter and Facebook. And
all the media and all these media and 60 Minutes saying, "Oh, we can't report on it because it hasn't been verified." I'm like, since when has that been a problem for you guys?
Yeah.
Stuff you can reporting on stuff because it can't be verified. What are you talking about? Oh, we think it's Russian disinformation. The National Security Director says it's not. The NSA says it's not. I mean, what is your problem here? Well, we think it is. I mean, it's so disingenuous. If it had been Trump Jr., they wouldn't have batted an eye, at that story. So the whole thing is frustrating.
Oh yeah, and to be clear, because again still monitoring the chat, and I'm probably responding too much, and we should get on with the show. But I want to make a final point. I'm very, very suspicious of the vertical lines in Wisconsin and Michigan. Absolutely, absolutely. I want them to investigate how they have a very large straight line up boost of a bunch of ballots without much of anything for the other side. It's so statistically unlikely as to be laughable. I want them to bring the evidence of that. I want them to be able to do it. Our election process makes investigating this stuff really hard. So I want them to do it. I absolutely do. But I do want to I want to pose a question to the chat and challenge you on one thing. The initial question that kind of sparked this was, have you lost faith in the election process, or would you ever vote again? Well, what's your alternative answer? To just not participate? Well, then you never win again. It won't matter if it's fair because you're not participating. So again, that's where I'm coming from on this stuff, and I challenge you with that alternative. Now, maybe some of you say take up arms or whatever. Maybe. I mean, good luck. Maybe some of you say fight for reforming the voting process. I'm all for it. Let's do it. Let's figure that out. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm waiting to be entertained by what the Trump campaign brings, and I think almost certainly this is going to see Supreme Court action at this point. The numbers are too close. So it's got some steps to get there, but we're going to see something hit the Supreme Court because Pennsylvania already has a case up there, and that's pending. And I think Georgia might as well. I don't know if the Georgia case was reserved, but Pennsylvania's was for sure. And Pennsylvania seems to be, those things really do seem, those votes seem like they're going to matter. Oh, I had a quick opinion question for you, Kurt. Is this a time where we're going to see the military vote matter specifically?
Quite possibly.
In Georgia. Because that's something that you may only see in a footnote or a down paragraph section on the Georgia ballots. Military ballots are not counted yet. They won't be done counting till after all of the other stuff is counting. So in Georgia, they will likely release the results without having counted the military vote yet. Which is kind of an interesting sort of place to be. But the military absentee ballots in Georgia will tend to be counted a little bit later.
I think it might just also be helpful to give people a brief timeline of some of the legal dates that are coming up as part of this process, just to give people an idea of where we are.
Yeah.
So right now, obviously, we're in the period of counting the popular votes and the filing of the certifications, and obviously any potential recounts. The next big date on the calendar is December the 8th, which is called the safe harbor deadline. So that is the date that by federal law, the electoral results have to be finally certified, in order to fall under the safe harbor protection of federal law. If they don't meet that deadline, then there's a possibility the electoral votes aren't valid or won't be counted. So the states have to be completely done by December the 8th, 2020. Then on December the 14th of 2020, the electors will actually meet in their respective states to vote. Those votes they have to be sent to Congress by the 23rd. And then on January the 6th is when those electoral votes are actually counted by a joint session of Congress. And assuming that they get to the requisite number, that's the date that the president is formally and officially legally elected. So there's a couple different things that could happen in between those time periods. There could be some issues with recounts. There could be some issues with legal challenges. If something gets really bizarre, there could be some challenges in Congress as to potential electoral votes. That would be fun. Of course, if it's a 270 Joe Biden win, there could be a faithless elector. That would be fun. So there's all kinds of possibilities here, but that's just and then of course, January the 20th at noon, we have the next inauguration. So that is the timeline of where we are.
Yeah, it's and those are very important dates because for court things going up to the Supreme Court, everything has to happen before really before December 23rd, was it, right? When the electoral votes are cast.
Yeah, I mean, when you look back to Bush versus Gore, that was decided on the safe harbor date. That was December 12th, because that was the safe harbor date in that year.
Sure.
So then you would want the Supreme Court. You'd want a Supreme Court decision. You'd want a final decision from the Supreme Court by December the 8th. And that's that's where all the courts are bawling. They're running completely with chickens with their head cut off to be able to meet those kind of deadlines. So,
right.
Fun times.
And that's the cool part about election season with these legal challenges is you do see the courts show that they actually can get through something in a reasonable amount of time if they have to, because they will have to. The lower courts will have to move very quickly. Initial suits on this stuff are filed in state court. They're getting same day rulings already on some of these things. There are more challenges that could come. So we'll be watching that. I'm sure Uncivil Law will be watching that on his channel as well. And
then the other thing to watch for, which is interesting, is whether Nancy Pelosi will keep Speaker of the House, because the Republicans picked up quite a few seats, so her margin is thinner. So maybe someone will challenge her for Speaker. That might be fun too.
Who do you want to challenge her for Speaker?
I don't really care.
What about AOC? You want AOC?
I think it'd be hilarious.
I think so too. Because the Speaker of the House sets the agenda and sets the votes.
Yeah.
So she would
that'd be hilarious. Speaker AOC, Jesus Christ. Speaker Ocasio-Cortez. Wow.
But
that will set her up. That'll set her up very nicely for a presidential run in 2024. She'll be 35, right?
She's got to be close.
Yeah.
If not, then it's 2028. So we'll see. Real quickly, let's, in case people don't know what a faithless elector is very brief. When you're voting for president in your state, and this is especially for Europeans who may not be as familiar with the system, when you're voting for president in the United States, you're not actually voting for the president. You're voting to pick an elector who is likely to vote for that president. And the elector selection process is hammered out in the state legislature. Basically, there's a popular vote that's done. And when the popular vote comes in the majority of states, their electors are going to be from a list provided by the respective parties. So the Republican Party will put forth a list of electors. The Democrat Party will put forth a list of electors. The one who wins gets to then proffer the list, and they pick the electors off of that by some arcane magic that I don't remember or understand. And then those electors submit their votes to Congress on, I think you said December 23rd this year is when they submit the votes. Congress counts them on January 6th. And the reason for all of the delay is, remember, when they wrote these rules, it was horse and carriage, and there were no cars or internet. So that's how the process is done. Now, there are no federal provisions on how an elector votes. It's actually, in some ways, a free speech right of them to vote however they want. So the Minnesota electors are all presumably going to vote for Joe Biden. But, for example, if it comes out in the next 3 weeks that Joe Biden is literally a Russian asset, and it's proven or whatever, and he's like Hill Vladimir on the national level, the electors can choose not to vote for him. There's nothing binding them to their vote at the federal level. Some states do have minor to major criminal penalties for an elector to actually flip and vote against how the popular vote is determined. So if in the scenario that Kurt mentioned, if Joe Biden gets exactly 270 votes, which he would need to win, and one of the electors were to change their mind and vote for anyone other than Joe Biden, it doesn't have to be for Trump. It could be the Libertarian or Kanye. Maybe they're a big rap fan.
That's right.
I don't know. However that works out, they could, in theory, send it to Congress to pick the president. It's really unlikely. Don't ever get your hopes up on that scenario, but it is possible for an elector to vote in a different way than their state has them sort of designated to. So that's a brief explanation of that. Yes, our system is very, very strange. Very, very strange. Your vote for a president is so far removed from actually voting for a president that it's kind of weird that it ends up working out. Okay, just laugh and honk your nose says it's hard not to be black-pilled. Yeah. Even if Trump wins, America loses. I said that on the election stream. Who wins? I said America doesn't. Demographic change means Republicans will never win again after this. Say hello to universal basic income, social credit score, great reset, death of all freedom. We had a good run, boys. How do you feel about that sort of idea? Because I was this came up yesterday on the stream where Ty and Tim were talking about stuff, and I said, there is the alternative theory beyond the voter fraud possibility or whatever, and the alternative theory is just that the country is moving away from Republican principles, and therefore the Republicans will be in a minority and will not be coming back anytime soon. What do you think about that sort of cultural shift idea?
Well, I think that the election we just had somewhat speaks against it. Democrats have been preaching this idea that demographics is destiny, which seems super racist because it presumes that certain races will vote certain ways. And Trump did much better with Hispanics than he did. He did much better with minorities than he did. I think he got 26% of the overall minority vote. I think that might be a record for the Republicans, at least in recent memory. So someone will double check me if that's wrong. But, what that speaks to the long-term future for the Republican Party, who can say? But if I were looking at these numbers right now, I'd be encouraged that maybe the Republicans, I have seen some people on the far left go so far as to say, well, the Cubans, they're white now because they're voting for Trump. They're white now. They're voting. The reason they voted for Trump is because they believe that they can be white, and because they believe they can be white, they're voting for the white supremacy that they believe they'll be part of. Okay, look, I guess that's a theory too.
If Cubans are finally white, I can start appropriating their food without consequence, and
Excellent.
I'm with it. I'm with
Excellent.
it. Cuban soups and sandwiches are delicious.
If Cubans are whites, that means that Cuban cigars are white, so they've been made by, and that means they've always been white. And so, we've just been oppressing ourselves this whole time or something.
Exactly. Corathus says, so theoretically, when this goes to the court, in the states where the razor-thin margins and no verifiability, could the court send those states into a contingent election? Do you want to start with this one?
No, I just don't. I don't see that happening. That's one of the big things with any sort of lawsuit is what is the remedy. That's putting aside the legal issues as to whether or not there was a violation or fraud or anything else. The sort of ultimate remaining question is what is the remedy? You need a remedy, or you can't do anything as a judge. It makes it non-judiciable. So you're not going to. There's no way on this earth that a court is going to order a new election on a statewide level for it. I can't even imagine them doing it on like local levels. That they could somehow, maybe if they could somehow narrow the fraud down to like one particular precinct or something, maybe. But beyond, other than that, no. And then the questions are like, what are the remedies? And I can't. It's hard to think of any.
Right. There's one of the things that you mentioned before was notice and opportunity. Notice provided to you, and then an opportunity to be heard. This is a part of due process. Your due process right, and you'll find it coming out in various constitutional questions, but specifically Like for example, a federal government employee who's fired over a Facebook post. They would actually have notice and an opportunity to be heard. They'd be told they were going to be fired, and they could go through an administrative process to challenge the firing based on their First Amendment rights. Whereas you working for a private company, they fire you and you're done. Here's the problem with the idea of a revote. Is that we're talking about timelines being so crunched and people being disenfranchised of a granted property right in a vote. Now, you don't have an inherent right to vote. We've talked about this before. Kurt and I have specifically talked about this. You don't have it. However, once the state affirmatively grants you a right to vote, you have an equal right to vote that everybody else similarly situated to you has. That's the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So once Minnesota says there's a general popular vote available outside of rare exceptions like felonies and stuff like that, you get a property interest in your voting right. Okay, so you have that. Once you reorder an election, you very much on such a short window. Remember that there's a constitutional mandate on when electors must be chosen. So not only do we have to get a court to decide to reissue an election, you then have to get the infrastructure out to redo the election and count the vote prior to the date of certifying the vote. So
there's no time.
There's no time to do it, and there would be numerous constitutional challenges from hundreds of thousands of people saying, well, I already voted and then I left the country. I went to another state. I did this. There's no possible way for me to get back. I'm disenfranchised out of my vote by this process. It creates too many problems that the court just won't touch. And that's part of our due process rights. That's why we have an election date. And that's why it needs to be a date where an election does stop. So that's that. I don't think anybody should hold on to the idea for the presidency that we will redo an election. It can happen for a smaller government body because those aren't constitutionally mandated dates. Those are laws that can be changed, they can be modified, there can be emergency modifications, but your constitutional processes are minimum standards. So
I mean, you have this ultimate drop dead of January 20th at noon.
Right.
So it's like, what can you do about that, right? So
yeah.
But we can move on to our topics.
Yes. Phoenix Animation says, "Hey Nick, I still have some character slots available for my comic Galden. I also launched my other book, Reclaiming Xandra. Both books are on Indiegogo. Also tagged you on Twitter about Marvel making Loki bisexual. Weird, right? Well, I guess. Blaine20 says the fake ballots will not be counted. Trust the watermark. We'll see. I think it might be more appropriate to say the fake ballots will be challenged. And they may be counted initially, and they may have some way to pull them out. I don't know. David Ochoa says, are we going to ignore the JoJo's Bizarre election reference? Just let Trump and Biden have an anime-style battle with Jorgensen trying to get in the fight and getting Yamcha'd. Bad Vibe says, Oregon's decriminalization of small quantities of drugs has a few benefits. 1, lower CPS burden / less bad foster families and caseworkers. 2, lower matrixing of jails. And 3, economic bias and application of the law corrected. I think there's still problems with decriminalization, but versus legalization. But no, I think it's a good step, in all honesty. Siren Jack says, okay, Nick, here's your evidence. 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42, Klaatu, Barata, Nikta. Gerard Garvin says, I'm putting my Kangol hat on now. Nick got past 90K and is now intentionally trying to lose subs to get back to 89,700. Also, interdimensional demons control Jack Dorsey. Okay, that's what we've got so far for chats. Let's, I've got the Trump speech here. Kurt, I'll have to send you the link and we'll start it at the same time if that works for you.
Sure.
So that we can be on the same sort of timeline. If you want to pause it, just say pause and I'll go. Oh my gosh. There. Here's the... Should I text you the link or should I send it to you in our chat here?
Text is fine.
Okay. Go. And I got your link to the other videos. Let me pull this up on stream and we'll start it in just a second. Oh my god.
All right, I'm ready when you are.
Almost there. right, I've got it up on stream. We've got volume. Get the chat back up so I can see what's going on. And here we go, guys. We're going to start it up. 3, 2, 1, go. Hold on, pause. Sorry, pause. I don't know why the hell it's not picking up audio for that. Sorry, having all sorts of audio problems ever since Naj was at my house. Okay, can you give me a little bit of a audio, Kurt? Nope. Oh, okay. But I'm not picking you up, so. Oh. Yes. I'm never letting anybody come to my house ever again. Okay, can you chat with me? Oh, I hear you now. I heard you drink. And I think we've got the Trump thing. What the? Pardon my English. Okay. Why can't I just have this?
I think you should just listen to it, and you should say it in your own voice, like a translator. You should just do the voice yourself, so you can listen to what Trump says and then say it back. That'd be good.
I'm doing this. Here we go. And I think I just need to change you now. 1 second. God, this is such a disaster. I'm never using anything anyone suggests ever.
I noticed you picked up another 3,000 subs, so congratulations for that.
Today?
Well, I don't know. Last time I checked, you were at 87, and now you're 90.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. The election stream did wonders for that. Okay, I think we're good now. All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
To protect the integrity of our very important 2020 election.
I love how he says
count
election.
The legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. To name just a few, we won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech.
Big topics.
We won by historic numbers. And the pollsters got it knowingly wrong. They got it knowingly wrong. We had polls that were so ridiculous, and everybody knew it at the time. There was no blue wave that they predicted. They thought there was going to be a big blue wave. That was false. It was done for suppression reasons. But instead, there was a big red wave. And it's been properly acknowledged, actually, by the media. They were, I think, very impressed. But that was after the fact. That doesn't do us any good. We kept the Senate despite having twice as many seats to defend as Democrats. And in a really much more competitive states, we did a fantastic job with the Senate. I think we're very proud of what's happened there. We had many more seats to defend. They spent almost $200 million on Senate races in South Carolina and Kentucky alone, 2 races, and hundreds of millions of dollars overall against us. At the national level, our opponents' major donors were Wall Street bankers and special interests. Our major donors were police officers, farmers, everyday citizens. Yet for the first time ever, we lost 0 races in the House. I was talking to Kevin McCarthy today. He said he couldn't believe it. 0 races. Very unusual thing, 0. And actually won many new seats with, I think
that's
many
wrong,
more on the
right?
way.
Didn't they lose
This
something?
was also
Maybe not.
the year of
Depends
the
how you're counting, I
Republican
guess.
woman. More Republican women were elected to Congress than ever before. That's a great achievement. I won the largest share of non-white voters of any Republican in 60 years, including historic numbers of Latino, African American, Asian American, and Native
Yeah,
American
I was saying that too.
voters.
26%.
The largest
Huge.
ever in our history.
Huge.
We
Huge,
grew our party
huge
by 4
numbers.
million voters, the greatest turnout in Republican Party history. Democrats are the party of the big donors, the big media, the big tech, it seems, and Republicans have become the party of the American worker, and that's what's happened. And we're also, I believe, the party of inclusion. As everyone now recognizes, media polling was election interference in the truest sense of that word by powerful special interests. These really phony polls, I have to call them phony polls, fake polls, were designed to keep our voters at home, create the illusion of momentum for Mr. Biden, and diminish Republicans' ability to raise funds. They were what's called suppression polls. Everyone knows that now. And it's never been used to the extent that it's been used on this last election. To highlight just a few examples, the day before election, Quinnipiac, which was wrong on every occasion that I know of, had Joe Biden up by 5 points in Florida, and they were off by 8.4 points, and I won Florida easily. So they had me losing Florida by a lot, and I ended up winning Florida by a lot. Other than that, they were very accurate. They had him up 4 points in Ohio, and they were up by 12.2 points. And I also won Ohio, great state of Ohio, very easily. The Washington Post said Biden up 17 points in Wisconsin, and it was basically even. They were off by about 17 points. And they knew that. They're not stupid people. They knew that. Suppression. There are now only a few states yet to be decided in the presidential race. The voting apparatus of those states are run in all cases by Democrats.
His hair looks like a blur
in all
effect
the
in
key locations
Photoshop.
by a lot, actually. And then our numbers started miraculously getting whittled away in secret. And they wouldn't allow legally permissible observers. We went to court in a couple of instances, and we were able to get the observers put in. And when the observers got there, they wanted them 60, 70 feet away, 80 feet, 100 feet away, or outside the building to observe people inside the building. And we won a case, a big case, and we have others happening. There are lots of litigation, even beyond our litigation. There's tremendous amount of litigation generally because of how unfair this process was. And I predicted that. I've been talking about mail-in voting for a long time. It's really destroyed our system. It's a corrupt system. And it makes people corrupt even if they aren't by nature. But they become corrupt. It's too easy. They want to find out how many votes they need, and then they seem to be able to find them.
I want to talk
They
about
wait
that
and wait, and then
section
they
when
find
we get
them.
done.
And you see that on election night. We were ahead in vote in North Carolina by a lot, tremendous number of votes. And we're still ahead by a lot, but not as many because they're finding ballots all of a sudden. Oh, we have some mail-in ballots. It's amazing how those mail-in ballots are so one-sided, too. I know that it's supposed to be to the advantage of the Democrats, but in all cases, they're so one-sided. We were up by nearly 700,000 votes in Pennsylvania. I won Pennsylvania by a lot, and that gets whittled down to, I think they said now we're up by 90,000 votes, and they'll keep coming and coming and coming. They find them all over, and they don't want us to have any observers, although we won a court case. The judge said you have to have observers. Likewise in Georgia, and they're appealing. Actually, they're appealing. We won a case that we want people to watch, and we want observers, and they're actually appealing, which is sort of interesting. I wonder why they'd appeal, that all we want to do is have people watch
Not a
as
good look.
they do the vote tabulations. Likewise in Georgia, I won by a lot, with a lead of over getting close to 300,000 votes on election night in Georgia. And by the way, got whittled down, and now it's getting to be to a point where I'll go from winning by a lot to perhaps being even down a little bit. In Georgia, a pipe burst in a faraway location, totally unrelated. to the location of what was happening, and they stopped counting for 4 hours, and a lot of things happened. The election apparatus in Georgia is run by Democrats. We also had margins of 300,000. In Michigan, we're way up in Michigan, won the state. And in Wisconsin, we did likewise fantastically well. And that got whittled down. In every case, they got whittled down. Today, we're on track to win Arizona. We only need to carry, I guess, 55% of the remaining vote, 55% margins, and
I think it's smaller
that's
now.
a margin that we
has to carry.
significantly exceeded. So we'll see what happens with that, but we're on track to do okay in Arizona. Our goal is to defend the integrity of the election. We'll not allow the corruption to steal such an important election, or any election for that matter. And we can't allow anybody to silence our voters and manufacture results. I've been doing a lot of public things for a long time. I've never had anything that's been as inspirational, by people calling, talking, sending things to us. I've never seen such love and such affection and such spirit as I've seen for this. People know what's happening, and they see what's happening, and it's before their eyes. And there are many instances which will be reported very shortly. There's tremendous litigation going on, and this is a case where they're trying to steal an election. They're trying to rig an election, and we can't let that happen. Detroit and Philadelphia, known as two of the most corrupt political places anywhere in our country, easily cannot be responsible for engineering the outcome of a presidential race, a very important presidential race. In Pennsylvania, Democrats have gone to the state Supreme Court to try and ban our election observers, and very strongly. Now, we won the case, but they're going forward. They don't want anybody in there. They don't want anybody watching them as they count the ballots. And I can't imagine why. There's absolutely no legitimate reason why they would not want to have people watching this process, because if it's straight, they should be proud of it. Instead, they're trying, obviously, to commit fraud. There's no question about that. In Philadelphia, observers have been kept far away, very far away, so far that people are using binoculars to try and see, and there's been tremendous problems caused. They put paper on all of the windows so you can't see in, and the people that are banned are very unhappy and become somewhat violent. The 11th Circuit ruled that in Georgia, the votes have been in by Election Day, that they should be in by Election Day, and they weren't. Votes are coming in after Election Day. And they had a ruling already that you have to have the votes in by Election Day. To the best of my knowledge, votes should be in by Election Day. And they didn't do that. Democrat officials never believed they could win this election, honestly. I really believe that. That's why they did the mail-in ballots, where there's tremendous corruption and fraud going on. That's why they mailed out tens of millions of unsolicited ballots without any verification measures whatsoever. And I've told everybody that these things would happen, because I've seen it happen. I watched a lot of different elections before they decided to go with this big, massive election with tens of millions of ballots going out to
This is
everybody.
a talking
In many
point
cases,
of
totally unsolicited.
Barr from back in
This
September.
was unprecedented
He was
in
saying
American
the same
history.
things.
This was by design, despite years of claiming to care about the election security. They refused to include any requirement to verify signatures, identities, or even determine whether they're eligible or ineligible to vote. People are walking in there. They have no idea. They're just taking numbers. They're writing down things, the workers, and doing a lot of bad things. And we have a lot of information coming and litigation that you'll see that will shake even you people up. And you've seen it all. The officials overseeing the counting in Pennsylvania and other key states are all part of a corrupt Democrat machine that you've written about. And for a long time, you've been writing about the corrupt Democrat machine. I went to school there, and I know a lot about it. It hasn't changed. It's a long time ago, and hasn't changed. It's gotten worse. In Pennsylvania, partisan Democrats have allowed ballots in the state to be received 3 days after the election. And we think much more than that. And they are counting those without even postmarks or any identification whatsoever. So you don't have postmarks, you don't have identification. There have been a number of disturbing irregularities across the nation. Our campaign has been denied access to observe any counting in Detroit. Detroit is another place, and I wouldn't say it has the best reputation for election integrity. Poll workers in Michigan were duplicating ballots, but when our observers attempted to challenge the activity, those poll workers jumped in front of the volunteers to block their view so that they couldn't see what they were doing. And it became a little bit dangerous. One major hub for counting ballots in Detroit covered up the windows again with large pieces of cardboard. And so they wanted to protect and block the counting area. They didn't want anybody seeing the counting, even though these were observers who were legal observers that were supposed to be there. In Detroit, there were hours of unexplained delay in delivering many of the votes for counting. The final batch did not arrive until 4 in the morning, and even though the polls closed at 8 o'clock. So they brought it in, and the batches came in, and nobody knew where they came from. We've also been denied access to observe in critical places in Georgia. In multiple swing states, counting was halted for hours and hours on election night, with results withheld from major Democrat-run locations only to appear later. And they suddenly appeared, and they all had the name Biden on them, or just about all. I think almost all. They all had the name Biden on them, which is a little strange. I challenge Joe and every Democrat to clarify that they only want legal votes, because they talk about votes, and I think they should use the word legal votes. We want every legal vote counted, and I want every legal vote counted. We want openness and transparency, no secret count rooms, no mystery ballots, no illegal votes being cast after Election Day. You have Election Day, and the laws are very strong on that. You have an Election Day, and they don't want votes cast after Election Day, and they want the process to be an honest one. It's so important. We want an honest election, and we want an honest count, and we want honest people working back there, because it's a very important job. So that's the way this country is going to win. That's the way the United States will win. And we think we will win the election very easily. We think there's going to be a lot of litigation because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land. We'll see. But we think there'll be a lot of litigation because we can't have an election stolen like this. And I tell you, I have been talking about this for many months with all of you, and I've said very strongly that mail-in ballots are going to end up being a disaster. Small elections were a disaster. Small, very easy to handle elections were disastrous. This is a large-scale version, and it's getting worse and worse every day. We're hearing stories that are horror stories, absolute horror stories. And we can't let that happen to the United States of America. It's not a question of who wins, Republican, Democrat, Joe, myself. We can't let that happen to our country. We can't be disgraced by having something like this happen. So it will be hopefully cleared up, maybe soon, I hope soon, but it'll probably go through a process, a legal process. And as you know, I've claimed certain states, and he's claiming states, and we can both claim the states, but ultimately I have a feeling judges are going to have to rule. But there's been a lot of shenanigans, and we can't stand for that in our country. Thank you very much.
All right. We don't need to listen to the press. Ask him if he's being a sore loser. The comments that they bring up. I remember from watching it earlier. Okay, so general impressions. Do you want to start, like, overall feel of the speech? What do you pull out of it? What sticks out to you?
Well, one of the points that he mentioned that I failed to mention in our discussion earlier was about the polls and the polls inaccuracy. I don't know whether or not they were deliberate in terms of their inaccuracy, but their inaccuracy was massive.
Off the charts.
538 the day before the election was projecting an 8-point spread between Biden and Trump, and they were off by a factor of 4. So and as Trump himself pointed out, the numbers in all these places were off 8%, 14% in these battleground states. So what
Yeah,
it means for the
Georgia.
future of polling, what it means for the future of a lot of things is debatable, but it's massive.
What about okay, ignoring the content of what he said, because I want to get to that in a minute. What did you make of his body language, his demeanor?
I thought it was pretty good.
Obviously, it's good, but it's markedly different than election night demeanor. And I know some people are probably reading it as defeated. I did see the exhausted, tired. I think he's conveying seriousness. That's what I'm pulling out of it. He's not using his hands as much as he does normally. Uses lots of hands, and he really gets in the triangle with them. He's not doing that. He's staying very close to the podium. He's not animated in his usual way. It was very much. I think a lot of that has to do with it was a statistic and numbers heavy sort of speech for him. And he's clearly reading off a script, which is fine. Because this isn't, his wheelhouse isn't in relaying all of the facts of multiple scenarios. His strength is really in being a hype guy for himself and selling.
Absolutely.
So I'm not criticizing him in that, but I found it to be interesting because he did take a very serious approach to it, and I think that's encouraging. He's not being bombastic and ridiculous about the case.
Yeah, I don't know that I got defeated from it. Tired, I can certainly understand. I didn't quite get defeated. I got restrained.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, I understand your reading. I just didn't quite get that impression myself.
I don't read it as defeated. I said some people might because I saw some stuff in the chat that might have indicated that. So no, I don't read it as defeated. I do get the fatigue, which is understandable. He's probably had very little sleep in the past couple days, and getting constant updates on it. But on to the content. One of the things I wanted to talk about is the distinction that he says we should make of legal votes. And while I think that's a good distinction to make, I want to caution it's really easy to add like an adverb to something, or an adjective in this case. Earlier on Twitter, I had someone who kept saying, no, these are legally cast ballots. And it's like, okay, well, you can't just add legally to cast ballots and suddenly make it so. And in the same way, this is my mild kind of criticism. Yes, we want all legal votes counted, but what is a legal vote isn't something we can just determine based on nothing. At that point, it becomes a conclusion that I think requires more process to it to be accurate. Otherwise, it's a minor criticism, and I know why he's saying it, but I think it's an important distinction that just because a vote comes in a way that we may not like doesn't de facto make it legal or illegal, right? Like different states have different rules and requirements, and there's something that can go around, or there's a determination that may need to be made on some of these ballots. That's all about that. But what did you think of the bit about the mail-in voting making it too easy? Basically, the idea is the opportunity crime, right? Like the teller has access to all the money, therefore they're more likely to steal the money. What do you make of that sort of assertion? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? I'm kind of curious of your intake or your input.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it in part. I think it overextends the point, though, because there are issues with mailed-in balloting, as we've sort of been highlighting. But I think those issues are containable. And one of the points that slightly I get a little bit irritated with when he says, well, these ballots that are coming in are so favoring one side. Well, that's not for the least of reasons that the Republicans have been saying for a long time. Mail-in ballots are corrupted. So they've been encouraging their own party to go vote in the polls. So of course you'd expect, the Democrats have been saying do mail-in. The Republicans have been saying don't do it. It's corrupt. And then he says, well, all these votes that are coming in are favoring the other side. Well, it's like, of course they are, because you told your own voters not to use it. So you would expect that result. It's not surprising.
I think he tried. I don't think he did it effectively, but he tried to make a distinction between the idea of just merely favoring Biden and being I think he didn't, maybe he did say, but he didn't want to emphasize the point of specifically with Wisconsin when the 119,000 ballots came in, and it was like 100-1 or 1,000-1, Biden over Trump. It wasn't 75-25. You know what I mean?
Well, I think some of that, because I'm getting states confused because so many states have given so many reports. But one of the states that was talking about like this 1,000 vote difference, or one of them, was basically saying it was an issue with how the numbers were being reported from the county or the precinct level, because different vendors are using different software. So it was an error in the way the numbers are being reported, and that's been corrected, which I'm somewhat inclined to believe. I understand people don't believe it, but it makes sense as a plausible reason, especially because all these mail-in ballots are coming in more and more and more, and so that leads to some problems that maybe we're not as exposed before. But yeah, that's kind of what I think about that.
Yeah. I found it very interesting. I do think he's right. I'm curious of your take on the amount of litigation and what is the like drop dead number. So I was bringing up yesterday that if he's litigating in one state, if it comes down to one state, for example, he's litigating on the votes in one state, he's got some kind of shot. Maybe it's 25%, maybe it's 50%. I don't know where the number lies, but wherever it is. But once you add a second state, we drop that number exponentially, I think. And then once you add a third state, it goes down further and further. He's talking about litigating in multiple states. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia being the obvious ones, maybe having to litigate North Carolina.
Well, he definitely needs something more than a recount, because recounts don't turn up these kinds of ballots. Recounts turn up a couple hundred ballots. They turn up maybe 1,000 ballots. They're not going to turn up 20,000, 30,000 ballots.
Sure.
You're not going to get that in a recount.
What remedy do you think they seek here? I mean, so obviously one of the remedies they're looking for is stopping the vote outright in Pennsylvania. And if they stop the vote right now, they win. Right? They win Pennsylvania if they can stop it, no matter what happens. So they're trying to do that. But that's not a remedy the court is likely to grant. Like, just stop counting isn't a legal remedy. It'd have to be just stop counting ballots collected after X time, blah, 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 which Pennsylvania is already supposed to be segregating out some of those ballots. So maybe that's where their remedy lies. But what is the remedy in a state like Georgia? Like, I mean, he's in mandatory recount territory now either way. If he wins Georgia, there's a mandatory recount at this point.
Well, I'm glad there's going to be a recount, because it's going to be really, really close no matter what it ultimately comes down to.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Are you familiar with the recount process in any of these states?
Not particularly, no.
Okay, someone had asked, and I said I would ask you if you were. If not, I'll try and prepare a show specifically about the recounts. Maybe I can reach out to someone who knows the process really well. If I talked about how the recount process would go, I'd be making it up, and I don't want to do that. But yeah, so I don't know. I think he raises some interesting points. I think he raises interesting questions, but I'm ultimately left on the legal question of what is the remedy? Where is the court going to intervene in a way that's favorable to Trump? Because for example, and maybe you can correct this, I don't know, but let's say he challenges Wisconsin or Michigan. What challenge could he reasonably bring in either of those states to undo what's done? I don't see anything.
Yeah, I don't see any remedies either. That's a big part of my problem, is trying to find remedies to a lot of these things. It's like you can get a recount to the extent that ballots were segregated. You might be able to deal with those differently. I don't know what states are segregating what ballots in terms of mail-in ballots, when they were received, when they weren't received. I know Pennsylvania is segregating the ballots that were received after Election Day, and they're segregating another set of ballots too that I can't quite remember off the top of my head. We talked
about it earlier. The ones that are unverified by
the unverified ones,
by a particular date. Although I don't think that date is actually triggered yet. So, it's a weird scenario. So Eagle Loan I believe, is saying there were 8,000 fraudulent votes in Michigan yesterday and 12,000 today. But the problem again is, what is the remedy for those fraudulent votes? You can't remove them. Once they get tabulated in and certified by the Secretary of State, there isn't a mechanism to go in and remove those votes. That's the big problem there, because we don't have a process that tracks a vote to a voter for the most part.
No, in fact, we are specifically trying to not do that for a whole number of reasons. We don't want vote selling, and we don't want people being intimidated on their votes. So every state, to the best of my knowledge, and there was a debate on this when it came up to Oregon or Washington, because they had barcodes. And I was trying to look into that to try to figure out if there's any way to tie the vote to the voter. But everywhere I've ever seen, they always try to separate the vote from the voter.
Right.
And try to make sure there's no way to track. That's one of the reasons, incidentally, that a lot of states prevent you from bringing cell phones into the voting booth, and they get really upset if you take a photo of your ballot. It's like, why would they let me take a photo of my own ballot? Because they don't want you to be able to vote sell. They don't want you to be intimidated. It's like, we don't know what your reasons are. So yeah, there's no way to track the vote to the voter. It's supposed to be anonymous. And yeah, so there's no way to undo that once it's in the pile, because it just looks like every other vote.
Yeah, and the only distinction, I guess, is the potential that mail-in ballots are somewhat segregated. But even those, once they're brought into the counting locations, they're not, like, as far as I know, they're not batched out. Like, well, these are mail-in votes from Wayne County, turned in at this time. Here's the box. They don't go, like, back into that box, I don't think. I think they just go in the pile of ballots waiting for recount if necessary. So, yeah, it's it's a weird question. So let's discuss this, though, because this is an interesting question. What if there is no remedy for this election? Is there remedy that's provided by the Supreme Court that goes forward?
Yeah, presumably they could order forward-looking remedies. That's possible.
Any hypotheticals? I mean, I could think of them mandating. This seems difficult because of state control over voting methodology, but in theory they could try and order something that says any absentee votes must follow these criteria. But that seems too sweeping to apply state by state. So I don't know what
that'd be much more appropriate for Congress than for a judicial order. But yeah, I honestly, if I had to project, I'd honestly project the Supreme Court's not going to get involved on this one. I mean,
outside
that's
of the
just my thought.
Outside of the limited issues that it's already involved in Pennsylvania, for example, and perhaps in Georgia, in regards to
I don't think we're gonna see a Bush versus Gore this time. I don't think that's gonna happen.
Man, it's not looking good for the heroes, so to speak, from the court perspective. Okay, so let's do final thoughts on, I guess, where the election stands. Nevada or Arizona, one of them said that they're not planning on having the vote done until the 12th, I believe. That seems ludicrous to me. How have we not counted these votes? Like, how are we at a position of not counting votes until the 12th of November?
Yeah, well, I don't know what exactly they mean by that, whether or not they're trying to count all the mail-in ballots they think they're likely to get, or so forth and so on. I think Nevada said that they'd have some pretty solid numbers tomorrow. Pennsylvania said they'd have pretty solid numbers later today or tomorrow. So we might have a better idea where we're sitting tomorrow. But yeah, a lot of these states, their certification deadline is around the 20th. So, and then usually if there's a recount, it happens between the 20th and the day of the Electoral College, which I believe was on the 3rd. I could double check because I still have the thing up here. It's on the 8th is the safe harbor date, the 8th. So if they have a recount ordered on the 20th, that gives them 2 weeks to do a recount before the safe harbor deadline. So they still got time to recount. So yeah, they're not gonna, their certification deadline is still a good 2 weeks away. and then they have 2 weeks after that to finish it up.
So, what do you make of this? I don't know if you've seen it. Someone posted on Twitter. /poll has been working on this apparently.
Oh joy!
There's a paste bin of Wayne County voters who are deceased who have allegedly voted. And it's like 14,000 voters. Now, obviously difficult
Really?
that's the paste bin is 14,000 voters. I can say I picked one at random and that one had not voted. I did go through and check. But there are others on there who definitely have voted. People have posted the screenshots of it or whatever. And so presumably, I don't know what the accuracy rate of the list is. Presumably there's a second list of the verified questions. But what do you think if you can show, for example, now I think in Michigan it's going to be a moot point because Trump is down currently 150,000. He's down 145,000 votes in Michigan. So 14,000 dead voters, even if you take all of them and they all voted for Biden, that's not 150,000. Even if you multiply it by a factor of 6 and say that you only scooped up, X percentage of people, you're talking about having to scoop up over 10 to 1, or you'd have an over 10 to 1 expansion for that to actually flip the state. But hypothetically, is there a remedy that they could find? I don't think that there actually is one. Even if every one of these people did cast a vote, do you see a legal remedy on that?
Well, first of all, I'm having a difficult time believing anything like that. I noticed the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania said that she was aware of one incident where someone tried to request a ballot for their dead mother during the primary, but she was unaware of anything else like that. So, I'm having a difficult time believing that there's thousands or tens of thousands of dead voters out there. This isn't Chicago.
Well, it is Detroit though. The interesting thing, and I mean, I did the process. So the process that they have is they have the name, the birth date, or the birth year, and then they have the zip code, right? So you can go into the Secretary of State of Michigan and you can input the first and last name, you can input the birth year, and you have to go through the birth month until you get the hit. But I did it, and like I said, the person that I checked had not voted. And you can see that there was no ballot returned for that person. But I did see screenshots of people who you can see when the ballot was sent out. I mean, these birth years are 1912, 1920, 1922. I mean, these people would be pushing 100 years old. It's not strange that they're dead, right? They're old. They're very aged people if they are alive. So I know that there is at least some of it going on, but yeah, to the extent I don't know. But I was just asking in the hypothetical, like, let's say they had the entire number and it actually was consequential. Like, what do you do about it though? That's the question, because you can't undo a vote, right? Like, once it's tabulated, unless I'm wrong, I don't see how you undo the vote. Is there Is there any number where they invalidate a county? Maybe. I mean, where they just say, fine, Wayne County has too much corruption, it's gone. Is that a possibility?
I don't see that happening. I can't imagine that. Maybe on a precinct level, but I mean, I'm vaguely aware of some cases that I've read where some pretty serious stuff has gone on in precinct levels, and they haven't stopped those votes from happening. So I'm having a difficult time believing in those kind of remedies.
Yeah,
because we're just talking about something so extraordinary. Again, something that's happened once on a city council level or in a local election somewhere, where a court has ordered a recount or a court has taken some extraordinary remedies, because it's relatively small impact, because it's relatively low amount of voters. You can see those kind of remedies. But here you're talking about a national election. You're talking about things that are accorded to states by the Constitution under a federalism system. They have a whole process in place, and talking about disenfranchising, tens of thousands of voters maybe to get at to get at some number of corrupt votes. It's hard to imagine a court would order such a dramatic remedy.
Let's see.
I mean, it would have to be true. It would have to be truly amazing. It would have to be truly a beyond the pale kind of fraud. It would have to be 10,000 plus people who are dead voting. If 10,000 plus people who are dead voted, then yeah, maybe a court will get involved. But if you can prove that to me, then good luck. But I'm having a difficult time believing there's anything like those kinds of numbers.
Okay, I've got someone sent me a case. Siren Jag sent me a case, and I was told maybe if I listened to Siren Jag, I would understand. He sent me a case.
Okay.
It's Donahue versus Board of Elections of the State of New York, 1976, from the Eastern District. This is district court, so this is not appellate level. Let's see. Plaintiffs, who include Republican and Conservative Party supporters of President Ford, members of the Labor Party, bring this action seeking an order enjoining the Secretary of State and the governor from certifying the Democratic presidential electors, declaring the presidential election conducted in New York on November 2nd null and void, and directing that a new election be held. Plaintiffs allege that state officials acting under the color of state law committed fraudulent acts in the conduct of voter registration in the subsequent general presidential. Let's see what the opinion was. Opinion following evidentiary. So applying these standards to the pleadings of the case, we find the complaint as presently drawn does not state a claim upon which relief can be granted. Rather than dismiss the complaint with leave to replead because of time considerations, we grant plaintiffs evidentiary hearing on their request for a preliminary injunction. At the hearing, the plaintiffs will be allowed to amend the pleadings to confirm proof. So ordered. Here's the evidentiary opinion following the evidentiary hearing. Is, I don't know if you're looking this up. Plaintiff's motion for preliminary injunction is denied, and the defendant's motion to dismiss the complaint is granted.
Okay, so that proves my case.
Yeah, I don't know that was what you were looking for. They didn't redo the election. They dismissed it. They said they didn't do it. Again, the idea. So let's read this. Even if arguendo the proper universe had been tested and the proper voter sample selected, nonetheless, plaintiff's evidence of voting irregularities is susceptible of inferences other than fraud. It is conceivable that in many of the instances where old registrants who voted did not reside at the address of registration, there was no fraud at all. Given the existence of a permanent registration system in New York, many of these voters may live in the New York area, but at a different address and simply never bothered, blah, 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 blah. Moreover, even if we accept the plaintiff's contentions that 306,107 fraudulent votes were cast primarily in New York's urban areas, as a matter of mathematics, plaintiff have failed to establish that the outcome of the election would have been different in the absence of the fraud. As Dr. Bardwell conceded, the partisan nature of the vote was not a factor in his statistical survey. As such, it is impossible to determine what percentage of the fraudulent vote went to Mr. Carter, what portion went to President Ford. This is quintessentially what we're saying from the legal aspect, guys. And please do not misunderstand our delivery of legal opinion and analysis to you as like our personal preference on what happens, because it's not related at all. The idea that you can, again, I'm okay with the idea and the concept. I'm actually full-throated believer in the concept that election fraud happens. Likely happened in 1976. Likely happened in every presidential election since. They're all too important for fraud not to occur. The questions from the legal aspect are what can and will the courts do? The standard of proof required doesn't match with how we conduct elections. It's why there's never convictions for election fraud outside of like 6 rednecks who say, yeah, I voted twice and I'll do it again. Like, that's who gets convicted because they're the only people who actually admit to it. It's hard to nail someone on election fraud because you can't tell where they voted and when, and how many times and for who. So,
this is interesting too, because I've certainly had this frustration on my own channel from time to time as I've been doing legal analysis, and I'm not giving people the answers that they want to hear. And sometimes it's just very frustrating because I'm trying to, try to give this legal analysis, and they're not understanding what I'm saying, or they're just so upset with it that they're not, accepting what I'm trying to educate them. And it's frustrating. It's like what should be and what is. It's like, both Nick and I are trying to use the knowledge that we have and trying to look at the case histories that we are. And Nick just read me this case, and I'm like, okay, I understand every word that Nick just said. I understand what this says. This is in complete alliance with what I was saying before. So this is matching my legal analysis. And the fact that people are still frustrated by it is, a little bit irritating sometimes. It's, I don't know.
It's just tough because, like I said, I would love, and I hope that when they challenge these counts, and when they challenge the timeliness of ballots, that they're able to bring evidence and establish that there is a rule of law around elections. One of my biggest criticisms of the U.S. election is that there isn't a rule of law about it other than a permissive one. The rule of law that we have is so permissive that we will accept the fraudulent vote, the potentially fraudulent vote, in deference to the right of the voter. So, for example, if you show up on election day and someone has voted as you, right? Like they go to your precinct and you say, I'm so-and-so, I live at this address. And they pull it up and they say, we have this signature right here. And you say, that's not my signature. And they go, okay. Well, you just sign next to it, or we'll just say that the original signature was improperly recorded, and you vote again. Well, they're deferring to the right to vote, but the problem is, that is a potentially fraudulent vote, either from you if you're voting twice, or from the other person if they voted on your behalf. And there is no verification process because we value the secret ballot so much. Now, there are ways to do it, and we haven't done it yet because our voting process largely hasn't changed in technological function since, I don't know, the mid 80s, maybe, when we started electronically scanning them. But
in some ways we're going backwards, and I think it's actually good because Georgia was mentioning that this was their first election in 20 years that they've been using paper ballots.
Yeah.
And so actually going back to paper, I was like, what was wrong with paper? Paper was great.
Paper is great. And we saw the problems with this in 2016 that were alleged when we had electronic voting machines, is people would click one person and the thing would print out and it voted for someone else. We don't know if it was user error or if it was a program issue. And it could be both, and they're not exclusive.
Also all the software is closed shop. You don't have access to source code, so you don't know what some vendor put in there potentially to manipulate votes. Those, purely electronic votes scare the hell out of me. It's like, what's wrong with paper? Paper's great. If we want to count them electronically, that's fine because we can always verify,
right.
In reality. So it's something to verify it against. Paper is wonderful.
But
I think when you were talking about the fact that we want to count valid votes at the risk of fraud, it reminds me, I think it's Blackstone's rule, better that 10 guilty men go free than one innocent person be convicted.
Right.
So
that's
the same kind
concept.
of idea. It's like we want, we'd rather have 10 valid votes or 100 valid votes or 1,000 or 10,000, at the risk of the one fraudulent vote. And, the idea that we'd throw out 10,000 fraudulent votes to get at one fraudulent vote is ridiculous. So it's like, so yeah.
But it's go ahead. Finish.
No, I'm just saying that, we're both Nick and I are having a bit of a hard time imagining some court somewhere ordering some dramatic remedy, when there's so much, when, this is part of a constitutional process and the times are so short. And it's like, what is a court going to do? And we're having can they order election observers to be there? Yeah, that's easy enough. Can they, if ballots aren't being counted because of Sharpie or whatever, can they order manual recounts? Sure, they can order that. Can they, to this extent that ballots were segregated out, can they say, ballots that were cast after election day or, ballots that were received after this, maybe throw those out? Sure. So there's remedies to be had, but the idea that a government somewhere is going to reorder a vote on this kind of scale is unfathomable.
We're trying to tell you not to get your hopes up for a 9 white knights, or well, more appropriately, 5 to 4 white knights running in and saving the day on this. The Trump's real path to victory right now is just simply winning Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and either Arizona or Nevada. That's his path. Technically, he could lose Georgia or North Carolina, I believe, if he flips Nevada and Arizona. But he has to win Pennsylvania, period. Like, that's 20 votes. I think North Carolina and Georgia are both.
Yeah.
North Carolina is 15, Georgia is 16. So, yes, he could lose North Carolina or Georgia. He has to flip Nevada and Arizona. He's not coming back in Wisconsin. He's not coming back in Michigan. A court is unlikely to change those outcomes. So no matter what the caution is, no matter what you see or hear on Twitter, on the media, all of the voter fraud reports, they're all really, really important. Don't mistake that. But they're not going to change this election. They're just not. Because they're going to run into the same standing issue, if you want to call it that, the same fault in the case that we just read, that even if you can show that there was a massive scheme to backdate postal votes, right, in Michigan, for example. Let's say you have 500,000 votes in Michigan that were backdated. It's not that many, but let's say you did, okay? You can't show who any of those votes were for. Like, they just don't, unless they have some crazy machine that knows it. I don't think that they do. But they would have to show specifically that 500,000 block of votes that was improperly added to the totals and certified by the Secretary of State were for a particular candidate, and that it would switch the result of the overall election. If they can do that, they can bring it. The likelihood of them being able to do that is almost zero. Almost zero. So that's the idea. Barnes and Viva speculated about a re-election. Thoughts? Well, I mean, we're giving that thought right now. I think it's very, very...
Barnes and I, one of these days, we have to have a sit-down conversation or something, because Barnes, man, as much as I like him, he speaks with absolute authority and absolute clarity, even when things are a lot more nuanced and doubtful. And he says things like, he says things with this absolute assurance where things are a lot more nuanced. And man, he's entertaining, but his legal analysis is a little bit too black and white for my taste sometimes.
Well, and the hard thing is, I guess there's a theoretical possibility that a limited re-election could occur. And again, that's what they were moving for in this 1976 case. They weren't actually moving to, they wanted to enjoin the electors, and then they also had a re-election request in there. Those were two possible remedies. The court could have granted either or both. Sure. But you ultimately come down to the problem of proof. Can you show that what was counted will definitely change the result? The incorrect count that you allege, will it definitely change the result? And that is an almost impossible task. Even in Wisconsin. Okay, let's say, where I think this is actually maybe their best bet for that sort of thing, and I think it's a long shot. But okay, so Joe got the vertical line, right? 119,000 ballots came in for Joe. He only wins the state by just shy of 20,000 votes. Maybe they can do that. Maybe they can credibly present that those 140,000 ballots are improper. I don't know how. This is where we're struggling, is what information can you bring to a court that is admissible that says that this block of votes was tallied, obviously impacted the election in a specific way, and should be undone. Maybe they can do it. I don't know. It remains to be seen. That's the interesting thing, is we don't have examples of them being able to do this in the past, to say, here's what they need to do, X, Y, Z, bring it to court, file it, and you got it. And if they did, if they already had precedent for that, they'd already have brought the case by now. Right now, they're probably trying to figure out how they do it. So that's a possibility. Michigan, I really don't think that there's any particular voting block in Michigan that will make up the 145,000 difference that they've got. I think that the Trump campaign spending much more time on Michigan is a waste of resources, unless there's something I just don't know about that they do, which is possible. Of course, they have better information than us. Anything to add to that? Otherwise, I figure we read the chats and then we wrap up the show, because it'll be closing in on 2 a.m. at that point.
No, not really.
No. All right. There are some larger chats to get into here in just a minute. Oh, there's one from a Bob Ricada. We'll have to check that one out. Random Blaze says decriminalization of recreational drugs only helps those who do not hold jobs that require federal background checks and drug testing. Will take the federal government following suit before it affects everyone. I want that. I actually want. I think that the Controlled Substances Act is an abomination. I want states in control of controlled substances entirely, personally. So I think it should be rolled back. Bob Ricada, that is Papa Rackets, for anybody who's not aware, says, I won't be able to hear you because we are right by the Hawaiian Justin Bieber, but I'm going to have a hula pie in your honor. Give me a thumbs up. Here you go, Dad. Sorry it took so long to get to this. I hope you enjoy your hula pie. I'll send you a timestamp later if you don't see it. Ace Brain 2003 says, this election really proves that every vote counts, even if they're fraudulent. It does. Very good. DOG Beer says, why can't they just disqualify all ballots that came in after November 3rd? It's called election day, not election week. Everyone knew about this in advance. No reason not to have their votes in by the deadline. Do you want to tackle this one, or should I just rant about it first?
Well, I mean, some states require them to be received by election day. Some states don't. They only require to be postmarked by election day. It's just an operation of state law.
Yeah, that's about it. It's the states have the authority from the U.S. Constitution to determine the method of their choosing of electors. The Congress can set a date by which the election must be completed. And it hasn't, I don't know if it's been explicitly ruled that they can't control like the amount of time prior to the completion date, but I think it's implied that they have authority to set up a window of time for absentee and mail-in voting and stuff like that. So that's just how it is. It's state by state. So, but I agree in concept. Everyone knew about this. There shouldn't be any late ballots, but it's up to the states to determine it, and you don't get to go back and change it later. Overton Windex says, is there a scenario where Trump jams up the courts to the deadline, goes to the House, and Trump wins? Nuclear option? Theoretically, I guess. I think it's extremely unlikely. I think that's
I'm gonna go with no.
I think it's more unlikely than a faithless elector, in all honesty.
Yeah.
I think I guess there's a weird theoretical, but I think they just here's how the courts can remedy that. We're dismissing it because of the constitutional process, and it would be improper for us to interfere at this point. This is between the House or the legislature and the executive branch and election rules, and the court doesn't have any grounds to go beyond what is constitutionally provided. Nova Zero says, I keep bringing it up, and someone else did too. 2016, a minor at DEF CON was teaching people how to hack election machines. Quote, we can somehow secure crypto voting. No, stick to paper, fools. An InfoSec consultant. Yeah, and that's a strong sort of question. I've speculated that maybe there's a blockchain solution, but I'm not educated enough to say what that looks like or if it will be effective. So paper is shockingly reliable because there's a record that exists that you can go back and look at and take pictures of and be verified by anybody with eyes. So only the blind are useless. Crusader Saracen says, Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton in literally every major urban center except for Milwaukee, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Atlanta. Really gets the noggin jogging. I know. I'm with you. I agree. Crusader Saracen says, what do you think about the idea of mandatory voting like in Australia? While I hate the idea of the government mandating me to do jack shit, mandate D's nuts, you fucks, it would at least remove any anxiety or ambiguity about voting margins and turnout. I don't know how you implement it. Like, what's the... Is there a penalty? Like, what is the rent? What's the alternative to not voting?
Yeah, presumably you'd have some kind of penalty, and you could give them a discount on taxes or something. You just do what you do with the ACA. You make it a penalty that will call a tax, and you call it a day.
There you go. I feel like it'd be toothless, and it wouldn't actually produce the thing. I know. Rights are generally secured as negative liberties. The government can't take it away from you. When they start guaranteeing things, it gets really weird, because what if you're in a coma? How do you exercise your right to vote? Like, how do you do it? And then the enforcement of it, there's so much.
Well, if you're in a coma, how do you exercise your right to speech for that matter either? I mean, come on.
Right.
What is this?
Well, that's the thing. And a right to a gun doesn't mean the government, you're affirmatively required to go buy one or exercise the right. So I don't think it works out that way. But I don't know how Australia does it, though. Maybe it's effective. Bullcut Nationalist says NBC said there are 8,900 military ballots in Georgia, and that they might not count them because, quote, they might arrive too late. Thoughts? I don't know. It depends on. I don't know who's saying they might arrive too late. Maybe that's NBC. I'm not familiar with Georgia state law about military ballots, or if there's a federal ballot exemption or extension or anything like that. Presumably there actually, in theory, could be, because of the deployment that the military has, and which is federally controlled. The feds could intervene in that. I don't know. But that might be, NBC might be being cheeky as well and saying they might not count them if Trump stops the late arriving ballots thing. But I think military ballots are separate and would be a separate question. Who knows? 8,900 military ballots that, like the statistics would suggest, would skew towards Trump, could be the deciding factor in this election. It might be one of the only times the military vote has decidedly impacted an election.
That would be funny. It would be kind of funny if it came down to the military vote.
I think it'd be great.
I think it'd be great.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Pie Baker says, am I the only one noticing a few eldritch phrases in Joe's recent incoherent ramblings? Yes. He's channeling Cthulhu. Books, Games, Pottery says, hey, Nick, thanks for your excellent coverage over the last few days. Looking forward to you finally making it to 100,000 subs. You deserve it. Hey, thank you. By the way, let's get Uncivil Law on his road to 100,000 subs as well. He really does great stuff, and you should be checking it out. Links in the description. Go, click. Silky Johnson says, Nick, I get your points, but this is the gayest of gay ops from the Dems. They've been saying for months what they plan to do, and here it is in action. Ballots just happening to be found, stopping the counts, changing the rules at the 11th hour. Yeah, I'm with you. It's terrible. It's really frustrating. You've got to talk to your state legislatures. You really do. That's who controls it. Siren Jag says, Nick, I sent you a case to your Discord DMs that addresses all this thick, juicy precedent. Yes, you did. And it was not favorable for Trump. Books, Games, Pottery says, so the fraud just happens and nothing can be done. Great. It just makes me want to ignore it all. It's just too frustrating. I understand. Crusader Saracen says, there was at least one unfaithful elector. So here's a complete hypothetical. Faithless elector gets Biden to 269, goes to the Senate. Collins, Murkowski, and Romney flip, leaving it 50-50. What then? Is Pence still the tiebreaker? I think so, isn't he? Vice President casts the deciding vote?
I don't know. I have never thought about it.
That'd be the greatest I want it to happen.
The only thing that you're missing in that equation is that in the event that it goes to Congress, the House decides president and the Senate decides the vice president. So your hypothetical reality would be Pence deciding whether he or Kamala became VP. It would
Oh,
have
no,
nothing
no,
to do
no.
with who the president would
I
be.
disagree. I think the House puts Kamala Harris in the presidency.
Well, if they can't do that because she wouldn't be one of the top 3 vote getters for president. She's
That's
listed as
right.
VP.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
true. Damn.
Yeah.
Although, is it based on...
I know my constitution better. Oh,
It's...
no, sorry.
I'm trying to figure... Yeah, I guess she wouldn't be... Yeah, they wouldn't be casting the secondary presidential votes because they have to choose 2.
Yeah, that was the 12th Amendment, because before the 12th Amendment, the vice president was the runner-up in the presidential election, which was usually of a different party. It didn't work out that well. So as of the 12th Amendment, the president and vice president are separately elected offices. They're completely independent from each other. So Kamala doesn't have anyone, well, there might be a few write-ins, but she doesn't have anyone voting for her for president. So the House can't do that. They would only be able to count from the electoral votes, which would presumably be either Trump or Biden, unless Kanye somehow manages to get one in there, which would also be hilarious. No, actually, now that
Joe Jorgensen, right?
Or Joe Jorgensen, because actually the faithless elector could create a third person. So you could wind up with a faithless elector who throws it to the House. So you have a faithless elector who votes for Joe or votes for Kanye, because why not, in this hypothetical reality, or votes for Kamala just to make things interesting. And then, the House could do it. So that would be the way to do it. The faithless elector would vote for Kamala for president, and then they would pick her. Yeah, but the House doesn't vote by its 435. It votes by states in the House for the purposes of president. So you have to figure out where the state delegations are. So there's 50 votes in the House by state delegation.
Okay, hold on.
And then you have to figure out if the Republicans hold a majority of the state delegations or not, even though the Democrats hold a majority of the overall House. I think the Republicans do hold a majority of the overall state delegations.
Yeah, I think they do. So then it could be.
Yeah, so then they could. So even though the Democrats control the House, the Republicans control the state delegations. So the Republicans in the House would vote for Trump to be president. This is how bizarre these hypotheticals are getting. Fun times have I all.
Let's do it. And then Mike Pence casts the deciding vote, but he's actually secretly been against Trump the whole time, and he votes for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden as the vice president. Just kidding. Oh my gosh. What a disaster all that is. Okay. Thanks for the fun question, Crusader. Anonymous says, look, it's a demographic thing. Trump did very well with Hispanic voters and Biden did very well with deceased voters. Tickleson says, can't watch this in my filthy, freedomless UK time zone, but thanks for giving me a stream to enjoy on Friday, Nick. Peace. Hey, later, buddy. Mario Carter 13 says, it's Bush v. Gore on Hunter's stash of crack. Macca Jr. says, as Ron, where's my watch, Monica? You told me to go up to the elbow. Oh my God. Don't make me get my remote after I clean up Tyrone when he's finished with you. Well, that's demonetized. Band Puff says, late and gay. The Izzy Experience says, I'm going to go on the record and say, F mail-in ballots. Absentee is fine. Mail-in is a sham. A Trump voice. Oh, you got to tell me beforehand. The Izzy Experience also says, ever wonder why Election Day is after Halloween? Voters of the dead. Tony Neves says, both Stacey Abrams and Barry Soetoro's former speechwriters are out there running around harvesting ballots. The Affiliate says, where's General Sherman when you need him? Mario Valenzuela II says, the biggest losers are the never Trumpers. They could have helped Trump Minecraft the Democratic Party, but instead they Minecrafted the GOP. I mean, maybe. I don't know if I've seen... They may be out there. I don't know that I've seen a big enough discrepancy for never Trumpers to have impacted the election in a meaningful way. Have you seen anything supporting that? Like in Wisconsin, I don't know that we have Trump significantly behind the Wisconsin Senate candidate, for example, or Michigan. But maybe, and if it's enough, I don't know. It's a hard question. But that's possible. Suede's Lounge says, Biden set the all-time record for most votes cast for a presidential candidate in the history of American politics. Blew Obama out of the water. A man who can't get 5 people to turn up at a rally. I think that just proves that Democrats don't like black people. That's what I've learned. They like white people more, right? Can we infer that from that?
Wouldn't necessarily be the conclusion I would draw. I would also work on the fact that there's more people in the United States than there were 4 years ago, so that's probably a factor too.
What if it's a funnier conclusion this way, though?
Okay, fine.
Robert Romano says Chatham and Clayton counties counts were held to the bitter end. Why? Philly to the end. Why? Detroit to the end. Why? All behind closed doors. Well, Philly and Detroit are bigger than rural counties, significantly so, like to 10 and 20 fold the number of votes. That's
Yeah, and then these Democrat-leaning cities can't even manage to get an election counted, and they want to run the country.
Nailed it. It took me a second to catch that, and I love it. That was great. Rick Nikita says the homeless man that runs Twitter is banking a bunch on the Biden win. I think so too. Evan Rogers says, at this point, we're at civil war with the tyrants in our country. At this point, I think it's well past the time we act physically if need. I don't care about civility with tyrants. Screw them. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you divide the country appropriately to have a conventional war. I think it looks very different, so I don't know what it looks like in the end. He also says, also thoughts on Crystal Head vodka. It's fine. It's a little too acidy for my taste. I prefer Tito's, but Crystal Head's good. I enjoy it. Also, the Dems are traitors and should be charged with treason. They're cheaters. They must be stopped. Genghis Dong says, off topic, is it possible for states to balkanize, and how likely is it? Thoughts? Don't. Kurt, did you have any thoughts on that?
Not really.
I don't know. Evan Rogers says, the time for civility has passed. Fight these mofos on the streets. If you must, the communists are installing a dictator before our eyes. Stop them. Derek Dobish says, why don't you play the whiskey drinking lawyer at the end of the stream anymore? It's a banger. I do. It's just I've had many guests on, and the guest input is the same input as the whiskey drinking lawyer. It's a weird factor that I'm working on. I
am interfering with your song time. I am so sorry.
I'm going to be changing how I do guest appearances in the software used, which will bring it back. So that's the main thing. Delta 7 says, here in Brazil, we are fully electronic. The only way we had on the last election to check if there was no fraud, and there was to use statistical analysis, the Benford analysis. Very interesting. The asterisk says, separation of Chicago from downstate is more about trying to address the Illinois insolvency more than political power at the national levels. Steven says, could Biden and Trump both concede and a third party win? I want to see the adventures of JoJo and Spike. I do have a question about this. Does concession even matter?
No, that's the thing is concession has no legally operative effect.
Right,
you
because
can concede and they're still going to count the votes. If you win, they'll still count the electors. It has no legally operative effect.
Right. In a weird theory, the electors can vote in whoever they want of the eligible vote-getting candidates, and then that person can choose not to confirm themselves as president, and then presumably it would go to the vice president. I guess that's how it would work, but there is no such thing as concession. It's merely a formality. Randstein says, in my late 20s, this is the first time voting, and I feel cheated on to know that my vote has been postponed. I live in Vegas. Yeah, well, welcome to it, buddy. Alex D says, not sure if you mentioned, but have you guys seen all these stories about hidden watermarks? They're saying it may be a planned sting. Would be epic. It would be epic. That would be great. If they have somehow watermarked ballots, I will laugh again for days. That would be the funniest thing if they can come up with some scheme. Rhinosaurus Rex says, currently there's worry that Dems may take the Senate. Michigan, Dems made a comeback, and 2 others seem like they'll go to a runoff. Your thoughts? I think the runoff is their best possible
The Georgia one
chance.
is definitely going to runoff. Both those are going to runoff.
Yeah, and that's their shot. We'll see how that goes. Be energized, Georgia, especially if Biden wins. We've got to keep the Senate. That would be a disaster. I don't like having House, Senate, and presidency in the hands of one party.
If it's 50-50, and I have to listen to Kamala cackle as president of the Senate because she'll be there a lot, I'm going to be very sad.
Please don't, Georgia. Please, I will never come eat at Homegrown ever again.
She will camp out in that chair as they pass bill after bill and just ram everything through, man. It's been a while since we had a VP who actually presided over the Senate. I'm trying to remember the last one who did. But yeah, she might just camp out in that chair and preside there and cackle for days. That'd be good.
Ugh. CJ says Biden dies before January 6th. What happens? I believe it goes to Kamala. I believe
that's the most practical. At this point, it would go to the VP.
Renal Ryan says, hey, Nick, sorry if you covered this already. What are your thoughts on ranked choice voting? I think that's what it's called. I don't have an opinion on it.
I like it. I like some sort of preferential voting system. I don't know that ranked choice is necessarily the best method. Just straight approval voting, which is just the unranked version. So just select everyone you like instead of putting them in order. Also solves a lot of the same problems. But first past the post is problematic because it forces you to compromise your vote. And it'd be nice to like vote for the libertarian and be like, well, if they're not going to win, then I'll vote for this person. So you make you don't have to compromise between your real first pick and your second pick or third pick. So Maine adopted it, and I hope that it will spread. There's other voting methods that are technically superior. Concordant voting is the most technically superior, but it provides the most complications. Probably the best overall compromise is probably just approval voting. Select all that you approve of. Whoever gets the most votes wins.
I like that. I like the idea of being able to vote your principles and vote your hard swallow at the same time. That's a cool thing. Okay, next is the Herald Studio says, do you think the Hunter Biden situation could be enough for there to be multiple faithless electors? No, not a chance.
No.
The electors are typically partisans. Like they're people volunteer to be electors. And they're selected. Typically, they know someone. They're connected enough politically to the campaigns, or people within the campaigns that they're reliable votes. So unlikely. Trashfire Comics says, what if the Republican electors is full of never Trumpers and Democrat electors are full of walkawayers? Z says, no black pills allowed. Trump 2020. Worst case scenario, Trump 2024. What about Ivanka 2024?
I don't know. I kind of hope, I know this is a forlorn hope, but I kind of hope that if Trump loses, he'll go quietly into the night, which seems like a thing that will in no way happen. I'm sure that if he's kicked off Twitter, he'll find some other media outlet. But yeah, I personally, my girl for the next election is Nikki Haley. I really like Nikki Haley. So she's the one that I hope that will beat Biden in 4 years.
What do you think of my theory of Trump starting the next New York Post?
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening.
I think that'd be interesting. I think that'd be fun. If he did it by Twitter, it'd be even better. If he built a wonderful system of short communication that was much more robust and much more effective than Twitter, and it blew up, that's what I'm going for. Oscar Lune says, hello from SG. What is SG? Do you know what country SG might be?
No, I was thinking maybe it's Canada something. No,
I don't know. Oscar, if you could tag me and tell me what country SG is. Watch since Vic coverage. Just one thing I noticed bugging me. Do you think there is a search manipulation as when searching
Singapore.
Singapore. Okay. Welcome. Do you think there is search manipulation as when searching for Trump supporter, only crazy, unreasonable people appear since it's driving the divide? I don't know. There could be. I believe I was a full-on victim of Google search manipulation. On one of Google's systems, after I covered the James Damore case and made fun of some Google employees very specifically. Look, and I have the records of their internal communications about me that were sent. Thank you to a couple Google engineers who sent them to me. After that, I had bad search results on Google video search specifically for about 9 months, and then it eventually went away. So I know they can do it. It's very possible that they have done it. It's hard to verify, but they do. So that's certainly possible. All right. Conspiratorial Walnut says, Nick, Steve Pachesnik, former State Department, revealed yesterday that official ballots were blockchain encrypted with special watermark. 12 states have feds about to make arrests for major fraud. That would be the funniest. That'd be the November surprise no one saw coming, and it'd be great if they do it. I don't know. I don't know if that'll change the outcome of the election, though. There's two questions there. One, are the people responsible for the voter fraud held accountable for voter fraud that can be proven, and then or election interference? Two, is it linkable back to the actual vote results to be able to overturn a potentially bad decision? Those are two separate issues that would have to be resolved by probably two separate courts. One would be a criminal court and the other would be a civil court. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it sounds plausible.
Yeah. Passport says white means capitalist, diversity means communism. When you put it like this, everything they say suddenly makes sense. Random username says the courts have ordered a new election for the Senate in the past. North Carolina, if I recall. Also, GOP state legislators can just discard the vote and refuse any electors. If you refuse to add, I don't know if they can do that.
To refuse electors, you need a vote from both the House and Senate, and the House will never vote to.
What about what if the GOP controls the state House and Senate? Can they refuse to send the electors?
Oh yeah, I mean hypothetically, that's always the ultimate kick in the teeth judo move. This was quoted in Bush versus Gore too, because the power of the legislature to control who they send to the electoral college is a plenary authority that can, to quoting Bush versus Gore, can neither be abdicated nor there was another word too that they said the same thing. So basically, there's nothing stopping a state from saying our citizens voted wrong and we're going to cast our electors for this candidate. They can do that. It's amazing. So yeah, the city, because you look really funny at like the because I think you look at the Republican governments of like some of these places, be like, our citizens voted for Biden. How about Trump? That's the thing they can do because it's a power within the province of the state legislature. I
would pay infinite money and whatever. I'll stream for 48 hours straight if a state does that. Yeah. You do it, state, and I will stream for whatever amount of time is necessary. That would be hilarious. I don't even care. Oh my gosh. Okay. Nice to Lizard says, so I hear you about not ordering a new election, but Georgia might need one anyway, a mandatory runoff because no one got 50.1%. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, they're going to have a runoff.
Do they have a runoff for president though?
No.
That's
just for the Senate seats.
Right. Amateur Anth says we need to go back to 21 years old to vote unless you've served in the military. Way too many uninformed morons voting in the U.S. And what I have for you to say about that is lobby your state legislatures for that. They can do it. Charles Jones says, I simply told people to research WEF and was deboosted and hidden by Twitter. Life says, I just realized 69 million people for Trump. 69. The asterisk says, in Trump's demeanor, I got an affection of, I'm not mad, son. I'm disappointed. Whether it'll work well, who knows? Rojigami says, will the states ever have a nationally standardized electoral system that is a strict ID requirement that can be monitored live during elections?
Nope.
No, probably not. Because you have different states with different ideas. And that's how it's supposed to be. Nice to Lizard says, I bet Vic Mignogna will be reassured to know that no one can track how he voted. He might have gotten slandered and depersoned or something over it. Andrew Stout says, fake votes are like cockroaches. If you see one, you don't see 1,000. Fact. I agree. Oh, stupid YouTube. Trivia Aficionado says, I don't see why it would be so unbelievable that large vote fraud would happen. Magnify the election would just magnify the problems. It's not unbelievable that it would happen. It's unbelievable that it will be undone for this election. That's the distinction I'm trying to make. Porthus says, so I got the complete answer on the contingent election. It only happens when no candidate gets a majority of the electoral votes. Yeah, if they're at 269, if both candidates are at 269 or less, that's when the contingent thing happens, the 12th Amendment. Mars Ultor says, I get that y'all are telling us what the law is, but every word y'all say convinces me that the only solution is tar and feathers, like the Founding Fathers intended. That is an interesting, very quickly, conceptually, is there something to be said about the time that the Founding Fathers passed all this? politicians were held physically accountable with some level of regularity. And we've gone away from that.
I don't know if there's something in there or not, but if someone's suggesting maybe we should bring that back, that's may not be the worst idea I've ever heard.
I think so. Like you engage in public life, you put yourself to public risk. James Degnan says, so then if the courts aren't going to do anything, sounds like fraud is the best way to win. Just mix my cooler full of fraud votes with the bin of legit ones. Now, hypothetically, someone may have figured that out before this election and done it. Hypothetical. A fuzzy creature says, the problem a lot of us worry about is the state of fraudulent capture where you can't even remedy the situation because people in power are corrupt. I'm with you. That's why I want transparency in everything government does. Robert Levito says, if our military encryption can be hacked, then I have no faith in electronic voting. The problem with military encryption, at least what it used to be, was that it was proprietary, and proprietary encryption is notoriously weaker than open. Because exploits aren't found and remedied, exploits are found and held. Nova Zero says it's a little different with Australia than as there's enforced voting. That means each election is an authentication. Otherwise, you get a fine. It's also paper only, so stakes for fraud are too high. Dragon says, sent you a Twitter reply about a story in 2016 Detroit about a third of the ballots in Wayne could be disqualified in a recount because of ballots not matching. Austin M says, could Trump argue to cross-check down ballots to president? I don't think so. Did you see any? Have you seen that? I think I mentioned that story where down ballot voting is significantly different for Biden than it is for Trump in the swing states specifically.
Yeah.
I just don't know how you bring it, because how do you it may seem ridiculous that 70,000 people only voted for Biden and no one else on a ticket, but it's impossible to prove that they didn't intend that.
I don't know if that's ridiculous or not. I would have to see what that would be historically to know whether or not that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I don't know what the numbers are for people who only cast top of the ticket, or in the alternative, people who leave off top of the ticket, because I know that a lot of voters do that too.
So yeah, the ultimate issue you come into is how do you prove that they didn't just intend to do that? Fast Game Master said, "Oh, go ahead."
I have a funny story behind that. One time I was going to do a primary, and because I didn't like any of the people in the primary, so I tried to turn in a completely blank ballot, and the machine wouldn't take it. And the election people actually had to call into headquarters, be like, what do we do? Because guy actually wants to count. The machine won't take it because it thinks it's an undervote. I'm like, but I'm trying to undervote. Screw you.
I'm actively not voting.
I'm active. Yeah, I came here and I checked in to exercise my right to vote, and I've chosen not to vote. So I want you to cast my blank ballot, damn it. And I want you to count it.
Vast Game Master says, I turned 29 this week and I'm not happy about it. Why, man? Welcome to it. The 30s are great. You're going to gain more respect and also more pains in your back. Happy birthday, buddy. Lord Blackwind says, just to take a small break from the problem of apparently zombie voting, which chapter would you rather see in a live action series? Ultramarines or Lamenters? Lamenters. Ultramarines, I like the Smurfs because they're funny, but other chapters are more ridiculous, so I go with Lamenters. Adam Riley says, I despise the better than thou attitude we have for America here in Canada. We act like we're better than you when we are worse. We are off worse in our own regards. Enjoying Uncivil Law being on recently. Great guest. Hey, I agree. That's why I keep inviting him. Amateur Ant says, think you missed my super chat about raising the voting age back to 21 unless you serve in the military. Too many low information morons in the U.S. now. I didn't miss it. You may not be familiar, but I did read it, but I always read the $20 chats first as a policy. Robert Levito.
26th Amendment says what?
I don't know.
26th Amendment says what?
I don't remember. What does it say?
18-year-olds can vote.
Oh, yeah. Well, so he's saying though that we should undo that. We should go back to. We should repeal it. Repeal the 26th. Robert Levito says, I think 2020.
Well, as long as we're putting together a list, right?
I think 20.
Because we start with 17.
No, we start with
I've
the
also got
third.
some other idea.
We start with the third.
Yeah, you want some quartering of troops?
Listen,
you feeling the quartering?
As long as we get to keep the Fifth Amendment and I'm duly compensated at market value, I want forced renters.
I'm not sure that's how the Third Amendment works exactly.
I would make the argument. This is a taking. This is a taking. You took my, all my Ritz cracker snacks need to be replenished. Where were we? God damn it. Robert Levito says, I think 2022 will be interesting after this. Yeah, I do too. If Joe Biden wins, I think 2022 we might see a red wave in the House, which could be very interesting. That's what happened in 2010. It could be very, very interesting. Tyrannosaurus Rex says it's usually said that most civilizations either heavily decline and or collapse over 250 years. You guys think we are on track for this to hold true? I don't know. I don't see it. Maybe it's there, but I don't know what a decline or collapse looks like in this age of technology. I feel like wallowing in and idling in commercial comfort is more likely than some sort of real collapse. I honestly think that Kurt, did you read Ender's Game?
No.
Dang it. I needed you right now. So Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game, it's not too far in the future sci-fi. And the funny thing is the attitude the entire world has about the US is that the US thinks they're important, but they aren't. They're toothless. And I think that is where the US is headed, if anything, rather than like some dramatic collapse a la the Roman Empire, is one where the US sinks into consumerism comfort and loses its teeth on the global stage while other actors move in and coalesce into alliances and treaties that basically keep us thinking that we're fine so long as we're economically viable. I mean, that's where I see a modern collapse looking like, and it wouldn't feel like a collapse internally. It would just be a collapse on global presence and power.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most likely long-term there is the rise of China. I mean, they're the longest-term existential threat to U.S. influence in the world. Europe is never going to get their shit together. So I think China is probably where it's going to be.
Yeah. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not like an expert on it. It's just, that's what I think. Mars Ultor says, Kurt, your channel is smaller than Nick's because of your response to whether or not Democrats hate black people. Next comment, you showed promise, though. Did you respond to that?
I don't remember the comment. I don't remember what I said. I feel like divorced to context. I seem to remember that saying that Democrats were kind of racist in their idea that demographics means destiny, which seems like a racist idea because certain races should believe certain things. Seems like an inherently racist idea. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Seems like a pretty racist idea.
Yeah,
the far left Twitter who seem to be thinking the Cubans are now white because they want to be white because they want to be part of the white supremacy seems like a kind of racist infantilizing idea. So I said that, but I'm not quite sure what he means other than that.
I like it. I don't know.
I'm confused slightly.
It's okay. We'll just roll with it. Robert Levito says, also, it's my birthday. Officially a boomer. Take my money, Nick. Hey, thank you. I will gladly do so. Happy Boomer Day. Very important day in the life of any boomer. Austin Hartless says, they had to double check that I'm a U.S. citizen when I went to vote. Not sure if my ballot was even counted. I was born in Michigan, lived here my whole life. This is my first time voting. Is this normal? I don't know. They checked my ID this time in Minnesota when I voted because I hadn't registered from moving from my last address just under 2 years ago. I haven't voted since moving. I moved after voting in the midterms. So they checked my ID. I think the last time I demanded and showed them my ID, but I don't know how they do it in Michigan. Couldn't tell you. Maybe the chat knows more. Amateur Anth says, how is the U.S. not a banana republic after this election? We're no better than some country in Africa at this point. Very sad times. I mean, I think that remains to be seen. We need some more evidence on that, personally. Bad Vibes says, can local courts put an order to have the verification process on the states? as I think at this point, many voters across the spectrum would demand a less messy and effective system that can instill confidence in the system. In theory, maybe, but the method of control of elections, state and federal, is entirely in the hands of state legislators. So a state court stepping in, like let's say hypothetically, a Michigan state court steps in and says that there needs to be this voting process that's not legislated on. They just create it judicially, a verification process for Michigan votes. I think that the Michigan legislature would be able to challenge that to the U.S. Supreme Court or the U.S. To say that they have a constitutional authority to, or they could just ignore it, I guess. But they have the constitutional authority to determine their elections, not the state judiciary. Right? Like there's the state judiciary doesn't have.
Well,
they would have
the problem. The problem there is like Purcell doctrine dealing with the federal court's interference with state level authority on elections. So the hypothetical that you're saying is that the state judiciary goes completely off the rails, does something that's aberrant to the state legislature, so they're in violation of the state law. Can a federal government come in and fix that on some sort of equal protection issue? That sounds like a really nasty legal suit, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Because the state judicial, because the question of what the state law is, here's the real big problem. The question of what the state law is ultimately an issue for the state Supreme Court. So the hypothetical almost kind of defeats itself, because the state Supreme Court would be saying, we are creating this authority, and the state legislature said you can't do that because that's illegal. But the state judicial branch just said that's what the law is. So basically, you have a constitutional crisis on the state level, and I don't know what the feds can do. But thank you for the hypothetical. It made me think.
It's a weird question. RW Bimby says secession is illegal. King George, 1775. Yep.
Also, U.S. Supreme Court in Ray, whatever that was.
Well, White
v.
Texas.
1860 something.
I think it was White v. Texas or something like that, or Texas
was
v.
it?
White. It was after the Civil War, and the Supreme Court ruled that Texas seceding was illegal because they lost. It's like, well, they lost, so it didn't work. Two more. Crusader Saracen says Mike Pence charges his lightning from his fingers, floats down onto the Senate floor, strikes a T-pose, and casts a deciding vote to turn himself into VP. What a world that would be. At this point, why not, right? And Corin42 says ranked choice voting is just idiotic. How it appears to work in Massachusetts. If there are 2 or 4 candidates, the best choice wins. If there are 3 candidates, the second best choice wins. This assumes a fair amount of votes for each candidate. Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I'm not seeing it, but okay.
That's what we got. Any final thoughts before we wrap up, Kurt?
No, not really. Just had a great time as always, and enjoyed the discussion. And we will probably have to do a stream next week where we're trying to figure out if we know anything more. I guess that's the only thing. It's like, what should we take a bet on when we're going to know the answer to this? What's the over under on this at this point?
I mean, I don't know, because if they're talking about the 12th in some of these states. By the way, Trump's lead in Georgia is down to under 700 votes.
Oh, that's good news.
Some new updates there.
What was the number of votes from Bush versus Gore? Was it 531?
Something like that. I mean, we're pushing for the record. We're pushing for the record. We won't know. Like, once Georgia has to be 100% complete, and I mean, we're talking they're gonna have to have the military vote done. This is days away, and a weekend. It's government. Are they going to count through the weekend? I mean, they might just stop, right?
Oh, they can't be bothered to count on the weekend. I mean, they need their time off.
We'll have to see, because once I think they raised a legal challenge in Georgia. I think that once it flips in Georgia, they'll raise a legal challenge again. They may get shot down just as fast. I don't know, but I think they do bring another challenge if it does flip. I don't think we're going to know anything till mid to late next week about what's going on, but who knows?
If Trump somehow manages to squeeze this out at this point, the salt in the left is going to be so unbelievably real. I'm going to bathe in it. I mean, you know.
Oh yeah, it'll be. That's what I said. If Trump won by a landslide, it would have been massive. The moment he didn't win by a landslide, if he ekes out a victory or gets a court-ordered victory, the screaming will be audible across the United States. Like, you could just walk outside and hear the background call of it would be the funniest thing I can imagine. I hope it happens. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, we'll probably have to talk next week about what's going on. So
if Trump wins, we'll have to go to DC to see the inauguration. I think we'll have to make a trip on this one.
I would so the plan would be Trump wins, you and I meet in DC for a joint live stream. At the inauguration. I think I can probably swing that with the missus. We'll make it happen. That would be hilarious. And we'll have to see, guys. It really does depend on what happens over the next couple days. And at this point, stuff that like no one is predicting is happening every couple hours, in all honesty. So over the weekend, anything.
That's probably ultimately fair point. Like, what are any of our predictive powers worth at this point? You know, because it's like we're in some sort of world contingency where it's like, who knows what the hell's going to happen? Maybe we should just sit down and enjoy the ride.
And the best part is, many of the things that we've shot down tonight, you know, there's always some weird theoretical where they come up. So who knows? Who knows? We're watching with you guys. We're just trying to add some legal analysis to it and talk about what courts have done and might do based on our opinions and experience. So thank you guys for watching. Please hit that like button. Make sure you're still subscribed, because if sometimes YouTube unsubscribes people, although I think I might be out of it for a brief period, make sure you subscribe to Uncivil Law. Go watch his stuff. He finds great lawsuits. They're often funny. They're often complicated, and they're really good. And his analysis of it is great. Really tremendous, fantastic analysis. R.W. Bimby with the last chat says, if Trump wins, BLM Antifa will riot more. Look, they're gonna riot either way. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. We'll see you soon. Have a good night. Come to Twitch, RoboCop 2 tonight, guys. Ooh. I'm so happy. We'll see you there. Have a good night. Peace. Peace.